All right. Hopefully that
Yep.
fixed it. I updated my
All right,
driver.
check it out. Let me
restarted
know.
Prometheus. Yeah, we'll see. Let's get it some time to process the
Sure.
screen. Why- Here.
If you want, we could do audio only, and you could do your face to
No,
your audience, and
no,
we'd
I
call
don't
in
think
through Google
that's.
Voice. If
I don't think that's necessarily necessary. Let me
okay,
try setting this up through a different way. Let's go to Chrome rather than second monitor. Turn off the second monitor, and then that. Here.
second monitor. What are you made of money in this economy?
Well, my work monitor. See how that.
By the way, to my audience here, for those that care, I had been telling you about my work computer, my laptop that I have when I'm not at home, that I used to stream from, and the repairman thought it was the motherboard. It was not. He only charged me like $60, and he thinks he has it fixed. So I haven't turned it on since I got it back. I've been really busy today, but that was
Okay.
good news. I thought it was going to be like, I thought it was going to be a couple like $700-800. So aftershock, your 3 monitors. Arthur Three Sheds Jackson over here. Come on.
Yeah, it didn't help. But it seems to be a little more synced now, but I'm super desynced. We can just go. I don't really care.
I mean, honest to goodness, if you just want to do like a Google voice call, if you want to try Discord, here's here's what I want your stream to be as good as possible for you and your audience. So if that means they're just hearing me audio, I don't have a problem with that. And then we could share links that we need or something in Discord if we're sharing evidence.
Oh, I didn't know that that's what we'd be doing. I didn't really collect all the
Oh,
links.
no, I don't think. Well, when it comes to the topic that I'm going to be talking about, I saw you posting links to articles that basically say the opposite of what the headline said. So I figured you'd bring it up, and I was going to go through it for you and explain why no, actually,
okay.
The FBI didn't warn people, even though you keep
Okay.
posting that link. They didn't.
Sure.
But we'll see how it goes. It's up to you. Do you want to try to just do Google Voice?
Let's try. If you're worried about Discord, yeah, we can just do Google Voice. But if you can do Discord, Discord hasn't really been a problem for me.
Let's try Discord first.
In your channel there.
Okay. Let's do Discord first. That works for me.
And if it still doesn't work, then it's just my computer, and I got to figure out what's wrong with it.
Okay. So just while we can still hear each other, I'll just say this in case something goes wrong on Discord.
Yeah.
If something goes wrong, check your Twitter message too.
Okay.
I'll send you my number on Google Voice if you need, and then we can talk through there.
Yeah, that's fine.
But yeah, I'm going to end this right here, and we'll try Discord if that works for you.
Yeah, no problem. Sorry about this.
Okay. No problem. No, it happens. No problem. All right. 1 second. Leave.
And also leave. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. This is actually really lagging bad for me. I am dropping frames out the butt right now. And then yeah, as soon as I got out of whereby, the average render time went to 8.6 milliseconds. So I'm guessing it's a whereby issue with my computer. Might be a socket thing or something. Okay, where's Rob's channel? I know I'm in his Discord. Or at least I thought it was. I mean, it's possible it got removed. No, there. No, that's in supply. This one? Let the water Kai server? No, I don't think that's it. No, that's Turing news. Let's go to his Twitch really quick. And Rob Noerr. live somewhere. Link tree. Okay. What's your Discord link? I thought it was on your. I thought I could have sworn. Oh, you know what? I bet you're underneath. No. Twitter, link tree, Twitter, Patreon. Oh, that's what you wanted. Okay. Ah, a call. Okay. Let me get that set up. So yeah, as soon as I dropped from Whereby, my render time went normal.
If you listen, I sent you a direct call on Discord, so you don't even need to go through my channel.
Yeah, no, I got the call. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
You
cool.
on the call?
Yeah, I'm on the call. I couldn't find your. I don't know what the hell happened, but I got to figure out how to get this to.
You there?
Yeah, I'm here. What's going on?
Hello.
Can.
Good.
Yeah.
Going crazy there.
Can you not?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you not hear me? Maybe I'm not.
Yeah, I know the screen's black. I'm waiting.
There we go. Can you not hear me?
I got a weird humming noise that's coming through.
Weird humming noise?
You there?
Yeah, I'm here. I don't know what the fuck's going on. I guess. Let's see.
Weird humming noise coming through.
Can you hear me better now? Can you hear me?
The humming noise ended.
Can you hear me again, or is the humming noise back?
What the fuck? Now I can hear you. Go ahead.
You can hear me now?
Yeah. It's a little muted. Let me check. Yeah, there's a lot of feedback sometimes coming through. Let me check, make sure.
Maybe because you sound like you're in a bubble to me, as well. So maybe your settings got messed up or something. Maybe my settings got messed up. There you go. Now your audio is coming through fine.
Oh.
So
I can't hear you now.
Yeah, but now okay. So
check. Check your Discord audio settings. Holy, this is like instead of a debate, it's become a
Let me
troubleshooting on.
All right, so it is voice settings.
You think it's my?
Hello? Yeah, I think it might be yours because you changed your audio output.
I can't hear you. Let me check my settings again, but my settings should be good. Headphones. Yeah, let's check.
Now you're deafened.
All right, I think I can hear you now.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, when you were first talking, it sounded like you were using a different microphone. So
yeah, I switched it up. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
So that must have been what happened.
We good?
Yeah.
It's working good through your channel?
It's working like 20 times better. So just give me like 1 second while I get set up for this because I haven't used direct calls on this. I gotta pop out, see if I can get this to work. Oh, cool. It's gonna be the same way. Sweet. So podcast and video, and then I can just do that. There we go. We're good.
Okay. All right. I'm going to hit record. I'll do a brief introduction, explain what I think is going to happen in the debate, like sort of the framework for the debate.
Sure.
If you disagree, that's fine. So I will just let me start recording here in 1 second. Hey everyone, thanks for being here tonight. So I am Rob Noerr. You're probably watching on my show if you're finding this on my channel, but show's Normal America with Rob Noerr. Tonight I will be debating Cypher from Crowdsourced Politics. We're going to have several topics that we'll be talking about. Just to explain how the debate came about, there was a discussion going on about January 6th on a Twitter thread that I had started, and we sort of came to an agreement to talk about January 6th and issues like that after we had a discussion about policy. So, Cypher, if you're okay with it, I thought the framework for the debate would be as follows. Mm-hmm. We're going to do 2 hours. The first hour is totally yours. We can do whatever topic you want. You are the moderator / debater. If you need to cut me off, if you want to, if you think I'm taking up too much time, whatever, you're in charge. We will start as soon as we're done with this. We'll say it starts roughly 7:25. That will go until 8:25. We'll wrap up. And then at that point, we'll start the second topic. I don't know what topics you want to talk about. For me, we will be talking about FBI corruption and January 6th. But that's the way I see it. As long as you're fine with that framework, I'm good to go and leave you take control until 8:25.
Yeah, I'm more than happy with that. That sounds like a good plan. So just about what I kind of want to talk about, I want to see mainly if there's like anything we can actually agree on. I'm not looking like to debate policy necessarily, but I want to see like, okay, for instance, right? So I wanted to talk about a little bit of immigration. You and I are never going to agree on the wall. You want a wall, I don't want a wall. There's no point in discussing it, right? It's that simple. But maybe there's other stuff that we can agree on. So absent Trump or anybody else building a wall or some sort of barrier, fencing or whatever. What other immigration policy? Because I don't know much about your immigration stances. I only know some of the stuff that you've actually like debated other people on, but that's not really telling much, right? You're responding to how people are responding to you, and there's going to be shit being flung back and forth. Like that's just the nature of debates. So I was like wondering what kind of other policies you'd like to see implemented, and see if there's any. How much daylight's between us on those.
I'll give an overview on my thoughts on immigration. I'll try to be as quick as possible. I think that until we secure the border, that is a precursor to any immigration policies. I think that there is a movement by elite people around the world to sort of erode national borders, and they want to do so they can consolidate power. One of the biggest stumbling blocks they see that is first world countries, and so they want to erode those borders because it's good for corporations, it's good for globalists to just have a one world system. I think that a country cannot sustain itself without borders, and so I think that border security is a precursor to any sort of questions. There are things other than the wall we could do for border security. I think one of the most effective things, even more effective than a wall, would be punishing employers that are knowingly hiring illegal immigrants. But in general, I will say this: hypothetically, if you don't want to talk about border security and stuff, that's fine. But let's say hypothetically it happened, and so that precursor is done. Yeah. What would I like to see with immigration? I think that the dreamers, the people that are here through no fault of their own, their children, should be allowed to stay. I think that people that are illegals, it is infeasible to kick. There's probably over 30 million illegals in this country now. I think it's infeasible to kick that many out. So I don't think they should be given citizenship and the right to vote unless they do some extraordinary service like military service or public service. But I think they should be allowed to stay as guests until they break a serious law. I don't mean jaywalking or a parking ticket or speeding. I mean serious, like a serious law. And I think that legal immigration, there is room for legal immigration, but it should be a merit-based system solely. It should not be based on that we think the United States owes people in other countries anything. And I think that we need to relook at sort of the refugee programs we have in this country because they're massively exploited. And unfortunately, because of the bad faith people that have exploited those systems, that means we need to halt an acceptance of refugees until we could make sure that that system's non-exploitable.
Okay. So I think there's some stuff on there we can agree with. I like I said, I don't want to talk about the border wall itself, but border security things, maybe there's stuff we can agree with there as well. I understand that you're like, hey, until this is done, we can't talk about anything else. But in the reality of the situation, because of how the Congress is set up, just inherently set up, and with the filibuster and everything else, there's gonna have to be compromise of some sort. Now, if you're not willing to compromise on the wall, not you, but I'm saying in general, not you specifically, then there's no bridge there, right? But if there's other things absent like a giant wall, maybe that can actually be done. So when you say border security, what, like you said, specifically fining employers that hire people illegally or some other kind of mechanism for that, right? I can agree with that. I think that's actually what we should be doing. We should be going after employers that are hiring people illegally, because at the end of the day, they're mostly exploiting these people anyways. They're exploiting them and then in turn exploiting the rest of us, right? So, but at the same time, when I say that, I'd also think that we probably should have a bigger, more robust guest worker program, not because we don't have like enough people in the United States to fill every job, although that seems to be the case now, but because economies ebb and flow. Like if there's a say for example, we're in like a super tight, like even in a tighter labor market than we're in right now, and we need people to fill jobs. It doesn't matter what kind of jobs, like any job, right? That should be what we do. We should fill those jobs. We should train people to take those jobs, but in the interim, you have to fill them somehow. That's where a guest worker program comes in. So I don't see, I see that as a thing that we could do.
Guest worker, like I think that it's overused right now, and I think it's overused because we allow these employers to get away. For me, a lot of the left-wing perspective on this is sort of hypocritical, right? Because like I wrote a big article on this one time, like Bernie Sanders immigration policy. There's two contradictory arguments people make. One, it's humane to allow these illegals here. And second, the price of your produce and everything would go through the roof if we didn't have this. That's tantamount to saying, well, we should have slave labor to keep down the prices of your produce. No, I'm sorry. I don't want to, pay a few cents less for my apples off the sweat and tears off of some illegal immigration that's being exploited by some agricultural company. I don't have an interest in that. So, for me, the guest worker program, the reason it seems like it needs more robust is because of the exploitation I think that we see. If these people weren't, if they were forced to pay a competitive wage, these companies, then Americans would do the work. However, and I'll just say this briefly, this system is intertwined with another massive problem that's been caused by left-wing politics, which is our burdensome and generous welfare system. We currently pay people to stay at home in an unbelievable way. And then when no one wants to work, we say, look at that. We need to bring in immigrants to do work because Americans aren't willing to do them. Okay. If we stopped forcing these welfare systems in the way we had, then people would not be able to just sit at home and they would go out and get these jobs.
Yeah. So there's where we can debate some here. So, first of all, like I said, I agree with you. We should go after employers hiring people illegally and any sort of exploitation that happens at all. We're 100% in agreement with that. I don't know what you mean by people exploiting the current guest worker program. Are you saying that because because there's all the illegal immigrants that are currently working at places that's the exploitation, and if we get rid of that, then there's not exploitation with the guest worker? Or are you saying there's a guest worker exploitation in of itself?
A lot of the industries that are using the guest worker program are using that to hide how many illegal immigrants that they also have working for them, which allows them to have reduced wages. If they did not have the guest worker or the illegal immigrants, they would be forced to pay higher wages to be competitive with the labor market in other industries, which would mean more Americans would do those jobs.
So that's a fair point. So again, we agree there. So if that's the case, then what would you consider a fair wage for a farmhand, for lack of a better term for it?
Well, it's a difficult question. I don't know. The market sets these things. What would I consider a fair wage for anything? I guess the wage that people would be willing to do the job versus the skill and the labor level necessary to do it. Like, I hear people say this all the time. Like, I live in an area, I've never made $20 an hour my entire life. Up until I do home health care with people with developmental disabilities, right? So I made around $15 an hour for the last 3-4 years of my life. They had a special program at my job that allowed me to get a $3 raise. So I make around 19 something now an hour. I hear people say this all the time. Well, where I'm from, people wouldn't pick fruit for $30 an hour. Well, not where I'm from. $30 an hour would get people off their ass here. I can tell you that, because the average wage around here, I can't remember. I looked this up at one point. I think the average household income in my area is something like $32,000 a year. $30 an hour is way above that. And there are people doing backbreaking labor, farm labor, etc. for that wage here. So it's difficult to say what would a fair wage be. Well, it would be competitive, and the market sort of sorts that out. They would be forced to pay let's say, for example, let's say that this labor is grueling. It's the worst labor ever. Then they'd have to pay a lot because people aren't going to go to work for some grueling wage if they can go to Walmart and get paid more. So in that instance, maybe a fair wage is $25 an hour. Maybe it's not. You have to weigh things though. How laborious the job is, how much skill is required. But it's driven down artificially right now because of the flux of illegal immigration and guest workers.
Yeah, no, I don't think we disagree there either. I just don't know what the market is actually willing to bear here, because part of the illegal immigration hiring is part of the free market working, right? Like if the government didn't have any rules or regulations on that at all, they would just hire people that would be willing to do work for the lowest wage. Like I think you can agree with that.
Well, but again, like then you're not arguing with an ANCAP. I'm not saying the government. No, I know. I think we should. Right. We should have a limited government. And one of the most basic functions of a government is to secure borders, to make sure that we allow the people that are citizens to here. The government's purely an entity representing us that are citizens of the United States. That's it. Right. They should have our interests first and foremost. If it is determined after we end this corruption and sort of the people pushing for open borders, the X number of guest workers would be best for the financial health of the country and the best for the majority of people, so be it. But that decision should be based solely on what is best for the people of this country and not at all on what is best for illegal immigrants, guest workers, etc.
Okay. I mean, that's fair. I don't have any disagreement there. I'm just curious, like, so there has been, this was during, I want to say it was during Obama's last term, or the year I'm talking about. I'm not entirely sure, so don't quote me on that. But there was several articles coming out at the time about what people were trying, because there was a worker shortage in the farming industry due to a combination of people, more enforcement of that from Obama's administration, as well as Mexico actually doing better economically, and so people returning home and going back to where they actually want to live, right, rather than working thousands of miles away from their loved ones. And one particular farmer in this instance, and I know it's anecdote, so it doesn't really matter, but I'm just curious what your thoughts about it are, said that he couldn't get a person to stay for more than like 2 weeks, offering $22 an hour to pick vegetables.
Why do you think that is?
The work is it's hella hard. It's laborious.
So then should we be exploiting?
I'm not saying that we should. I'm not saying that we should. Right. I'm saying, like, they obviously, to me, they should be paying more. That's also going to increase the cost of everything everybody else is paying as well. It's like there's trade-offs to everything. I'm not saying that they should exploit people. I'm 100% against exploiting
all
people.
of these things. I mean, again, it comes down to a question of motivation. So I forget the guy's name. I don't know if you want me to dig for this source, I can. But one of the best people that have looked at this, and he sort of excoriated Trump for citing his work because he's by no means a conservative. I forget the name of this particular immigration expert, but he basically says that it's basically a wash with illegal immigration, that it does raise the GDP. It does benefit the extremely wealthy, the business owners, and it certainly benefits the illegals or the guest workers. But which there is a difference. I'm not lumping them in. I understand that. I just want everyone to know. I understand a guest worker is not illegal, but that's sort of bringing in labor from outside, right? That's what we're talking about. But the people, that money isn't just basically all good for everyone. The people that are negatively affected are low-skilled labor in this country, and that's predominantly inner-city Black Americans, where a lot of guest workers and illegals end up settling. So the very group that the Democrats claims to care the most about, poor people in the inner city, those are the ones that end up paying the burden. Meanwhile, this is why Republicans have been for lax border security, because their business interests that are donating to them, they're more than happy to have the cheap labor. Right. And so I'm unpersuaded when some business owner goes, well, we tried to pay Americans a wage, but they wouldn't accept it because it's so backbreaking labor. It's like that argument's not persuasive to me, because it's immoral to say, well, then we should have some, brown person from the third world come do that labor so I can have my avocado toast. I don't buy that, and as far as I'm concerned, there's a lot of work that's backbreaking labor and terrible. My job is mentally exhausting, not physically exhausting, but dealing with people with autism and other things like that. Yeah. And I'm there sometimes. I average usually about 75 hours a week. It could be mentally exhausting. People don't like doing it. We're having trouble finding people. But the primary reason that we're having trouble finding people is because you don't have to work anymore. You could stay at home and somehow
Okay.
find a government program to pay for you.
Let's talk about that. So, how do you believe welfare actually works? Like,
Well, there's a
how
lot of
is
ways.
well? So, what is the okay? Let's try to break it down then. What is one of the primary ways you think that welfare allows people to stay at home? Because there's limits on it. So there has
Sure.
to be there's limits on it. So it's not forever, but you're saying that it's allowing them to do that. What is it primarily that's doing that for you?
Well, sure. There's all sorts of welfare programs. For example, there is an incentive to be single parents. There's an incentive to be single mothers.
What incentive?
Some of the people, you get government money based on how many children you have in your home if you don't have a father in the home.
I don't believe that that's the case. I've heard that a lot,
It's
and
absolutely
I looked
true.
it up. It's not based on the number of kids. There's different cutoffs.
I can tell you right now, I have to be careful because I don't want to out a specific person here, but I can tell you right now that I'm aware of someone recently that has one child, and that child is nearing teenage, and they are currently paying, this mother works and single, that this mother is currently paying for childcare while they're at work. And now that they're having another kid, they will not have to pay for childcare for the second kid, and they also will no longer have to pay for childcare for the first kid. They will also be getting increased WIC and food stamps that will be coming to them. So much so, and I've known people that this has happened, that what happens is that actually they intentionally cut back the hours they're working because it cuts into their food stamp budget. And so they make the choice to say, well, if I worked a full shift, if I worked 40 hours and was full time, then that means I get less food stamps. So instead I'll work 15 hours. That way I could get the food stamps.
It's the cliff issue. The way the welfare is administered is pretty crappy. Well, the end of welfare as we know it under Clinton didn't actually fix anything. It just made it to where you had a time limit. And so, you got your benefits and then they got exhausted after, I believe it's 5 years. Some states have some play with that. So I think some states are a little less, a little more, but not by much, right? 5 years is pretty much the standard, at least for TANF. So, which is temporary assistance for needy families. That's direct cash payments and things like that. Single individuals.
It's not just. Please, I don't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, it's okay. Single individuals also have a cap on that, as well as food stamps, and a variety of other programs as well, right? So the kids, maybe I think the kids you can get like so much food stamps for a particular amount of kids, but after like 2 or so, it's like the same amount. WIC, I can't say.
I don't think so. It might not increase. Let me ask you bluntly, like it might not go up per kid, but it certainly goes up in some of the total amount of kids you have. For example, if I get $1,000 a month for one kid, maybe having 2 kids, I get $1,050 a month for each kid. But you're saying if I have a third kid, I still only get $2,100? That's not true. They're giving me money for that third kid.
It depends on a whole host of different things. I have a person in my chat saying right now that their child was a single mom for a long time and wasn't able to get anything. So again, it depends on situations. Maybe they were making money. Maybe
it would
they weren't.
depend on their right. That's. Yeah, but I mean, think about what you're saying. Doesn't even make sense, though. Like, maybe I'm misinterpreting. Let me be generous.
It wouldn't be any $2,000 a month, regardless.
Well, look at it this way, though. Like, I'm just using a hypothetical round number, right? Like, let's
try
say
to get
that I'm a.
Like, I think it's like
real quick though. Let me tell you.
Go.
Okay, let's say 800. That's fine. Let's say my wife. I tragically die tomorrow in a car wreck, and so my wife is a single mom, and we have one kid, and the government's like, we'll give you $800 in various programs for your kid, right? And then she has a second kid, and they're like, fuck that kid. We're not giving any money. Like, it's not happening, right? There's no way that's, if she's already qualified as a single parent for that one kid, they're not going to be like, sorry, we're just not going to give for the second kid. Unless there was some sort of extenuating circumstance, like she came into money or something. But I'm unaware of what the situation even hypothetically would be, that if they say you need help for one kid, that they would not increase the help if you have a second kid. The only situation that would make sense is if you came into money, but then they'd take away the help from the first kid.
Even if that's the case, I just don't see it. It's not one of those situations to me where each child is like a net benefit, right? Because there's limits on the total amount of compensation that you can get, and even if each kid adds money, it's not enough to outweigh the cost of that child. Now, I said I can't speak of WIC because everybody basically qualifies for WIC. WIC is specifically there to help nutrition in utero, and then I think it's 2 years, if I'm not mistaken. Basically, when you're supposed to be breastfeeding the child. to ensure that they have enough
I mean,
nutrients.
I think that I'll just say that again. I don't have the number. If you want to get into sort of numbers and stuff, we could try. I could just tell you this. I think that almost everyone, if they're being honest, will say that they've seen a situation like this. I have anecdotally seen single mothers that have 6, 7 kids whose kids are running around in clothes better than 2-parent households that are struggling and working because the amount of money that's given to these people, you can see the expert. It's true.
I think
you can say no. It's true.
You don't know where they're getting the clothes from. It's not from government assistance. It could be potentially from donations or something like that, but the government assistance is simply not enough to
government
do so.
assistance, but it's part of it, right?
It's not
part
only
of it.
that.
Let me be clear.
Go ahead.
Let me be clear just real quick, right? It's not just welfare, direct welfare payments or direct food stamp payments. There's all sorts of other assistance programs that are exploited, such as disability programs. But regardless of the reason, and we could continue to debate the reasons, there is no denying that the labor participation rate is down. So you have to explain at this point, right, where everyone has help wanted signs in every town. Yeah. I see them all over. Every fast food place in my little town, it has signs up that says we sometimes have to close early because we can't find people to work, right? But the labor participation rate is down. How can that be? If they're not how are these people surviving if they're not making enough through government assistance and other means to stay home?
Well, I mean, maybe they're just getting help from family. I know a lot of people that have just lived at home. I mean, that's just a fact. Like they're living at home or they're being on one income at this point.
Okay,
but it's not government assistance. There's not enough of it. It's simply untrue. You cannot survive on government assistance in most of the country. And I'm saying most of the country because I can't say the particulars of each and every single state and how they administer their own additional welfare benefits. So that's why I'm saying most. But federally speaking,
labor participation, right?
But in the 90s, there's going to be all sorts of reasons for that. So during the pandemic, a lot of people retired early, so they're no longer working. There's been, believe it or not, crypto booms and busts have actually helped people retire. As shitty as that is, I don't like it, but it's true. And then there's also, and I don't want to debate this topic because I think it's going to go forever. But there's also long COVID that's taking people out of the workforce. So you can't just do a direct one-to-one. I just
disagree, especially when we. Okay, I disagree. When we see that people are struggling with the cause of inflation, right? It seems that, like, if your logic is true, right, it would be incredible then because this cost of living is going up at a very high rate. Inflation's going up very high, and it has been for over a year now, right? But for some reason now, more than previously, people can afford to just be like, yeah, I'm done. I'm going to retire early. I'm going to rely on my family and things like that. And government assistance hasn't increased. The government assistance isn't allowing me to stay at home. Who are all these families that 2 years ago couldn't afford to provide for family members, but now with increased inflation?
Who said they weren't?
It seems odd to me.
Who said they weren't? You also have to take into a fact that people age into the labor force every day as well. So when we have the biggest generation, the echo boomers are in their prime age labor force, but they also go to school longer. So they're not actually in the labor force until later, but they're counted as being in the labor force, or being, negatively counted against the labor force. And then every single Gen Z person, the oldest Gen Z person is 26 years old. The youngest is, I don't know the exact cutoff, but I want to say it's 16. And so they're in the labor force, right? So if we have two generations that enter the actual labor force later than usual because of going to college or what have you, a lot less people. If you can, I think you can agree with this. A lot less teenagers work in industries while in high school than they did in like the 80s. Would you say that's fair?
Yes.
Okay. So, but every single 16-year-old, as soon as they turn 16, are added to the labor force.
Okay.
So how many more people is that, do you think?
Well, it's based on percentage, so it's not just an individual number, right? So it's
right,
based
but I'm saying
on the percentage of the people. But
if
the reason that so many.
But if the number doubles.
So what happened? So why was it in the 80s that six? Right. Okay. If the number doubles, but the population doubled, then it wouldn't be anything. But I'm not saying the population doubles, but you can say, right. And the number didn't double either. Right. And the question is, why were those people working in the 80s, but they're not now? What changed?
The need for education beyond high school in order to have a middle class lifestyle.
And that's not all that changed. Also, the
It's a
fact
lot
that
of it.
there is a lot of people working older, and so many of those jobs that were required in order to that were for younger people are now being taken up by older people, such as a lot of cashier jobs at places like Walmart. 10 years ago, you would see a lot
Oh, yeah,
of
that's fair.
17, 18, 19-year-olds. Now you see a lot of 60, 70-year-olds, for example. And also the labor participation rate doesn't take into account people that now have to work 2 jobs, right? So, for example, the average age of labor at this point, the median age is 42. In 2001, that age 39, right?
Yeah.
So we can see that the idea that people are retiring early and that's what's leading the labor force, no, they're actually working later.
No,
So if the
there's-
average, no, real quick, if the median age increased 3 years, then the idea that, okay, 16-year-olds aren't working as much. Well, if the average age of retirement used to be 65, but now the median age has been pushed 3 years, then instead of looking at 16-year-olds working, that would be offset by 68-year-olds working.
Not entirely,
How do you know?
because the numbers don't add up.
Well, what we know is
you're assuming, you have to assume that there is a 1-to-1 for that to work. You have to assume that for every non-working teenager, there's one working retired person or somebody that should be retired, and that's just not going to add up.
That might be true, but the assumption starts with you. Like, we have the raw data. We can see that labor force participation's down,
Labor force
and you make the
participation
claim.
is down.
Right.
Yes, and I'm
Right.
making
You
the
make
claim
the
that
claim.
that a large
Prove it.
swath between 16, I'll have to dig up the numbers again, but I did the math when Trump was talking about in 2017 about labor force or whatever. What it boiled down to is that there was roughly, these numbers are rough estimates because they're off of my memory, but I did the math. So there's roughly 2 million people that are stay-at-home parents. They're negatively counted to the working force participation rate. There's roughly 3 to 4 million people that are in school that are not working at all. Those are negatively counted in the labor force participation rate. The number of people that retired early, that is anybody between the age of 50 and 62, I think it's when they start considering it retiring early, not 65, despite that's when all the benefits kick in. That was another 3 or 4 million people. And then and then there was a lot more older people because people are just aging. So that also negatively impacts the labor force participation rate, because you're looking for how many people are supporting the economy versus how many people aren't working. So I don't think those numbers should be counted.
I get it. What I'm saying, it's smoke and mirrors, because what you're doing here is you're saying, well, there's all these factors that lead to a declining labor force participation. Yes. I'm saying, yes, but there are factors that are mitigating against that, such as people that are working longer, people that are working 2 jobs, et cetera, things like that.
People
and you're like, well, you would have to.
People working 2 jobs.
People working 2 jobs doesn't affect labor force participation. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that influences why younger people aren't working as much, because a lot of people are working older or working a second job, right? Anyways, the point I'm trying to make is this. You aren't giving any direct data. We know the raw numbers of the labor force participation is down, particularly since 2000. Like, we could see that the numbers have sharply dropped then. You're saying, well, the reason is it's just because young people don't want to work anymore and a couple other factors. But you're not giving real quick. Yeah, real quick, right? And then I say, well, there's people that are working older, and you say, well, you have to prove that the people that are working older directly 1-for-1 are these younger people. But I would have to say that actually the proof starts with you. You have to prove that the younger people that are taking off and weigh that against the people that are working longer is directly the 1-to-1, which led to the lower labor force participation. No, you're unable to prove that. And when I point to mitigating numbers, you say, well, you can't prove it's 1-to-1. Of course, because you can't prove that it's 1-to-1.
No. I don't need to prove that it's 1-to-1. If it's 1-to-1, then no, I'm saying that doesn't benefit my claim. But if it's 1-to-1, that benefits your claim. If it's not 1-to-1, that benefits mine. If it's
1-to-1 meaning 1-to-1 is not the right word to it. You need to prove that the drop, for example, from 2000 when we had a labor force participation of 66.8 to today when we have a labor force participation is almost more than 6 points lower at 62.3. You have to prove that the reason for that is because 16-year-olds don't work, because they choose not to work because of education.
It's not just 16-year-olds. It's people between the ages of 16 and 24, the number of people that retired earlier, the number of people that are the number of people that are stay-at-home parents, and the one that I forgot, and this is a big one, is roughly the 3 or 4 million people. 3 or 4 million? We'll just say 3 million. 3 million people that are on disability that are also counted negatively against the workforce. Now, you can say there might be issues with disability system, and maybe it's too generous. And I can point to anecdotes that showed you like this person waited for like 5 years before they were approved, and they could barely fucking walk that entire time, right? The system's fucked. We don't pay enough for the systems that we want to have. Well, I think you and I can agree that we want, a robust. When I say robust, I mean like not consonant. Sorry. When I say robust, what I mean is like every single thing is investigated in a timely manner to give people that deserve it, that need it, disability. I think we can agree on that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So in order to do that, we have to hire more people, and we don't. So that's why we have these weird fuck ups where you have one person sitting on the sidelines for 5 years while another person's like, whatever, I'm done with this case. I'm retiring in 2 years. I'm going to just prove everybody, right? Like that's part of the reason why we don't have this.
The system's exploited, but to say, well, we would need new people working to make sure the system isn't exploited. There are other ways that we could do things. For example, the government has regress and overspending, and also we're hiring 80,000 new IRS agents to go after your $600 Venmo.
That's not why
I suppose we could be using
hired.
That's what's happening.
No,
they're not going after the rich.
No, I'm not going to.
They're not going after the rich.
The 80,000.
They're not going after the rich.
No. Let me finish. The 80,000 number isn't agents isn't all agents that are looking at taxes, because the IRS calls everybody that works there an agent. So this number includes people that take the phone call when you're trying to bitch at the IRS for not getting your tax return in a timely manner. It also includes people that have to manually look at taxes for paying out people that are owed by the government. For
what
their
percentage
taxes.
of those?
I
of
would
the new
say
agents,
probably at least 50%, because that's where most of the people are.
So I just want to be clear. So you'll say that. So when people say, because this was the Democrat argument we heard, we need these new people so that we can go after the wealthy because they're not paying their fair share of taxes. Right. You're admitting that's bullshit.
No, I'm admitting that you do need more people, but it's not all 80,000 of those people that are going to be
half of those people that were hired are definitely not going to be going after the wealthy. They're just taking phone calls.
Probably, yeah. Taking phone calls, processing paperwork, etc. Because the IRS has been gutted since 2002 and hasn't had a budget increase in a percentage-wise budget increase in a long time.
It's
been one of those
in agents,
death by 1,000 cuts kind of thing that Republicans like to do.
Right. We need less IRS agents, right? And the IRS agents that are there should be doing it because the IRS is another politicized group that is going after people, going after low and middle class people more than the extremely wealthy that lobby to the very people. And that's what these new IRS agents will do as well, which is why they're not concerned about Sam Bankman-Fried. They're concerned about $599 for your Venmo funds.
So Bankman-Fried, fuck that guy. We can agree to that. He should be in prison. Excuse me. Sorry, I got the burps today. Ate pizza for dinner. So Bankman-Fried should be in prison. CoffeeZilla, if nobody's watched that interview that he got 4 interviews. Anyway, it's total like an hour basically of talk time with him over on Twitter Spaces. Guy admitted to fraud. It's funny. So he definitely should be in prison. And that's another issue of not having enough people in the government to do it.
That's a lie. It's a lie.
When I say that, I don't mean him specifically. I mean in general. Just to be clear.
No, that's
him specifically. He
I can prove that. I could prove that's a bullshit statement. You want to know how? Would that you tell me? Maybe you'll have a different take on this. The talking point I hear is this: that we would actually increase revenue if we have more agents to go after this, because the big fish, the very wealthy that you would get the majority of revenue from, they are able to get away with this thing because we don't have enough agents looking into them. Correct?
And the reason, just to be clear though, the reason for that is because they use shell companies to hide all their money, and that actually takes analysts to go through that use complicated math and other systems that require actual skills to do rather than phone calls.
Okay. So let's say then we had 10,000 IRS agents, and those 10,000 agents currently right now, I know that's not the number, but we'll just say hypothetically we have a small number of agents, right? And those agents have two choices. They could either, one, go after the big fish, which means there would be less people that they could audit, less people that they could go after, but at the end of the day, they would get greater revenue, or they could go after the small guy that's making $30,000 a year and squeeze the turnip to try to get a couple bucks from them. Can you explain to me why they do the latter instead of the former right now?
Okay, I'm sorry. So Just make sure.
Why do they go after?
Yeah.
Let me make it clear. If we need more agents, if I only had 100 agents,
Sure.
and I could direct them to go after one or two of the big guys or 100 little guys, I'd say go after one or two of the big guys.
So I
but
could
right now
explain
they don't do that. Real quick, right now they go after the little guys, and the argument is, but if you just had instead of 100 agents, 1,000 agents, then they'll go after the big guys. It's bullshit.
So what is happening here is that you don't have enough people to actually look over everything. So when you don't have enough people to actually look over everything, you go after where you can get the most, not the most bang for the buck, but where you can get the most out of anything. And when you're having to go after, when you go after rich people, not only do you need more complicated agents to actually go over their taxes, you have to have lawyers and you have to have other people involved in that, and they're going to tie it up in courts. And because they tie it up in courts, it costs the agency more money to go after those people. So by going after quote unquote the little guy, and the most times that they do that is just a simple processing. It's basically like the system's like, hey, you said you had 8 kids. We show you have 2. You owe us money because of that. That's the most of the things that happen. Most of the things that are done for bad taxes is done on basically a process, automated process system.
How many IRS agents are there currently?
How many
before Biden?
Really?
Before, just a ball. I'm not asking. I'm not having you to have specifics.
Okay, so so we're clear. When you say agents, are you talking about every single person who works at the FBI, or you want the people going after? Because it matters to people who we're talking to.
Let me rephrase it. Right? Correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't they say this is kind of doubling the amount of agents, which in your definition would be everyone?
Yeah. So that's
it was 80,000. So we'll assume that there's currently a bank of 80,000. And for the sake of your argument, can we say 50% of them are kind of phone call type people, and the other 50% are actual agents going after?
Anywhere between 50.
A reasonable guess?
We'll say 50%. Be conservative on it.
Yeah, I'm not holding you to the number. I'm just trying to get a ballpark idea. So, okay. All right. So that would mean that there's currently 40,000 people, lawyers, auditors, et cetera, going after people's taxes, correct?
Sure.
Okay, and right now those 40,000 are leaving the big dogs go because there's just not enough of them.
They're not leaving all of them go, but they're not able to go after every single person. So that's where the thing is here, because they don't have enough people. So they go after a combination. They go after a combination of the automatic processing, because automatic processing is cheaper and easier to do.
Okay, but the question is, what if it's so easy to do? Then you could do the automatic processing with very little people. Let's say that like these 40,000 agents would be able to get 5% of the people making over 500,000 a year, right? If they focused exclusively on those people. Now, according to the left, that would lead to more revenue for the IRS if they focused on those people making over $500,000.
It would lead more revenue for the IRS, assuming it doesn't get tied up in court and end up bleeding it through court litigations. And that's why you need a higher budget. So the higher budget,
wait a minute.
Allow it to not go stagnant in court.
You're jumping the gun, right? So more agents just mean you could go after more people, right?
No, it doesn't mean you just can go after more people. It means that the people that you are going after can have they can be looked at in a more robust manner, and you have more resources to actually dedicate to it. So the people that you're going after you're able to go through the court process a bit quicker, assuming it's not just like appeal after appeal after appeal. That's the only reason. Because
why would it change? Why wouldn't it be appeal after appeal after appeal? Magically, we hire 40,000 new agents, and now the rich decide.
You didn't understand me. I was saying that when you have more people, you have more people assigned to the same case, and that case can be processed quicker. Then it can go to the next guy. So if it takes 2 years, I'm not saying this is what it does, right? But if it takes 2 years to go after one complicated case because you only have we'll say 1,000 agents to spread out across all the complicatedness, and you suddenly triple that number. So you now have 3,000, 6,000, whatever the number I fucking said. Then you take the time by a third, and so instead of taking 2 years, you have like 8 months.
You're proving my point, right? So then it means that you could go after more people, right? But like right now, let's say in order to cut the time, let's say right now, hypothetically, that let's just say for each big dog over 500,000, it takes 100 agents focusing on that, right? And if you had 300 agents, it would cut their time down by a third, which means they would be able to go after 3 times as many of the big dogs, correct?
Within a same time period, not necessarily year over year. I'll give you that.
Okay, right. So then the question is, if it was really true that it would need more money for the IRS to focus on these big people, they wouldn't go after the little people at all, right? Because they would say, well, we could cut our time by third. Please, let me finish. We could cut our time by third for just putting 3 times more agents on these big cases. And yes, that might mean we can only get 2% of the big guys. But then doubling the agents, all that would mean is now instead of getting 2%, you go after 4%. The argument I'm making quite simply is this. There is no reason why the IRS will change their tactics because they've doubled their agents. Now they'll say, oh boy, it's still just as hard to get after the big guys. We're going to keep going after the low-hanging fruit, which is why they're announcing things. Yeah,
they don't need
of course they do.
No, they don't need the agents to go after the little guys as much because the little guys they're filling out their paperwork incorrectly. So those are mostly automatically processed. Now, when those are automatically processed, why is what occurring now?
How many agents right now are working on little guys?
I don't know. We can go with the 50% number and say it's
how hard do you think
40,000.
it'll be? How hard do you think it'll be? Do you think it'll require more agents to look at Venmo transactions? $600 and above?
Didn't that get not done?
I don't know. I thought that it passed.
I don't think it passed.
Maybe I'm wrong.
I'm pretty sure they abandoned that because of all the kickback, which honestly they probably should have. I understand why they were.
Why would they be suggesting it?
Because what they did, they probably did some sort of study where they're like, hey, a lot of people that are avoiding taxes are sending under the minimum of $1,000 to people, and are using Venmo and like other apps to do it to try to get around the automatic trigger notices from banks. But I'm pretty sure they said they're not going to do 600. And the 600 thing was, I think it was like an exploratory thing. I don't think it was even actually ever agreed to.
I could be wrong, but I'm seeing from NBC News from February 6th, Venmo, PayPal, Zelle must report transactions over $600. Here is
right, but wait. So IRS reminds Americans earning over CNBC Cash App transaction to report their earnings. Yeah, that's all this is. This is basically saying that you have to report your income. This was CNBC News published. I'll drop it to you in chat here if I can figure it out how to do it without getting all. All right, they're gonna see the chat.
So you have to report income of over $600 in payments now through Venmo, according to the new IRS.
Well, you're supposed to do that anyways. You're supposed to report.
No, that's not true.
You're supposed to report.
The threshold for reporting used to be high real quick. The threshold for reporting used to be high through 2021. P2P platforms were required to report gross payments received for sellers who receive over 20,000 in gross payments and 200 settlement payments a year. Beginning in 2022, the threshold's been lowered to $600 payments without any regard to the number of transactions. If you cross the threshold, this platform will send you a form 1099-K and to the IRS the following year. So in other words, what this is, you say, well, you had to report that before, but what this is designed is for the IRS to now have access to be going after little people that were making transactions less or over $600. They'll now be able to have agents going after that. So their audits will be more effective for people that may have been hiding that information. Correct?
Sure. Why hide the information?
Right. That's exactly the point. Right. And that's the argument that left ultimately defaults to here, which is, well, you shouldn't be cheating on your taxes anyways. Those new agents will be going after the little guy.
I'm not conceding that. I'm not conceding that point though, because because these are automatically done for the most part as of right now. So what this 1099 form is basically saying, hey, the 1090, what was it? The exact
1099-K.
Okay, so the 1099-K form, right? The Venmo sends one on your behalf to the IRS, and you get one as well. You're supposed to reconcile that with the IRS, so you claim that on your taxes. If you don't reconcile that and you try to hide that money, then the IRS is simply going to automatically file your form and then say, do you owe back taxes? It happens to everybody. It happens on every 1099 contract as it is right now. My brother Matt got hammed up for it because he didn't save because his employer wasn't withholding enough from him for his taxes because he was on a 1099, and so he didn't put any money away because he's ignorant. And so the IRS is like, hey, you owe us $2,000.
Right, but those transactions are through places. You're talking about like maybe he gets YouTube money or he's got a business.
It was a leaf guard company, like gutter leaf guarding kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. The problem is now that those are required. Venmo and places that are Cash App type things, right, are required to report that directly to the IRS. Like, you can't get around this. What this is for is to make sure that there are more successful audits of people that are making these sorts of transactions.
No, but you don't need the IRS agents to go over all these things because it's going to be automatically processed. You need the IRS agents to go on you need the agents that we're talking about, which is whatever the actual auditors are. So you need the auditors to actually go through a thing that has to actually be audited. When it's automatic system, when you have one system reporting to another and you're supposed to also report that money, it's going to go through a computer system.
What if you don't? That's the question. What if you don't?
The computer system kicks it out and they're like, okay, yeah, look, they not even an auditor would look at it and be like, yeah, this person owes money. Here you go.
So I just want to be clear. So then according to you, you're saying that almost no IRS agents right now currently work on auditing people making like less than 100,000 a year, because basically it's all automatic.
I didn't say that.
Well, but that's what you seem to be. Okay, no, when it comes to because it won't require any. Let me rephrase. It won't require any additional IRS agents with this change of $600 Venmo payments and things like that, because everything's automatic. So I don't
think these that you're talking about with this payment through Venmo, Cash App, whatever, I don't think these will have to have additional agents, because this kind of situation is going to be a computer system spitting out the numbers and it's just going to be a quick check. So it's not even an audit.
I disagree. And I think that the fundamental I'm sorry, I don't want to use the word fundamental. I'm trying to get that out of my vocabulary. I disagree. And I think that the overarching point is quite simple, that the idea that we have 40,000 agents right now, and it's just like, shucks, they can't really go after the big guys, so they just go after the little guys. But if we had double the agents, all of a sudden they'll be able to go after the big guys and they won't be increasing go after the little guys. It's bullshit. And when your defense is that going after the little guys is automated, and so therefore it won't change. I don't believe that. I don't believe it at all.
So when you say little guy, to me, that's anybody that's making that's basically owns their own little small business that doesn't make $100,000 a year on that business. I don't like these $600 payments that the IRS is now requiring Venmo and Cash App to report, just like any other 1099 kind of company, is no different than you work like my brother working at a leaf guard, that he got an automatic thing, a generated letter saying, hey, you're supposed to pay taxes X amount of dollars. You didn't claim that. You owe us this much money. That's not going to require an auditor. What's going to require an auditor? What's going to require an auditor? That's fine. But what's going to require an auditor is a person that is a bit bigger than a little guy. So we'll say anybody who makes $150,000 a year, but is maybe like their own sign printing shop that's trying to pay people under the table. That's going to require an auditor because they're paying people under the table, not stuff like this.
I disagree, and I'll explain why. Do you ever hear of anyone like with an OnlyFans or a Twitch stream, or someone that gets money that you could see when they're getting money, right? Like Twitch would be a good example. So if someone subscribes, people could see. Someone subscribed, that you could guesstimate based on how many subscriptions I have, how much money I made that year on that, right? Do you ever hear of those people not reporting their money?
I mean, I assume they are, but I don't actually follow streamers, what they.
You hear this all the time. You hear this all the time with like OnlyFans and things like that, where people will say, we're outing you to the IRS because you didn't report this income. According to you, every single person that receives money from Twitch, OnlyFans, etc., they're all audited if they don't claim it, because it's completely computerized. There is no human interaction.
No. I didn't say it's all going to be automated. I said that these kind of situations are automated. It depends on the person's other taxes. So if I assume that you make some money off of Twitch. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep, so you make money off of Twitch, right? You also make money from your day job. And I don't know what else you do. Say you work another job. Like say you got Twitch, YouTube, whatever, all this content creating stuff, right? You also work this other job and you have another one. All that combined might require an audit because you have 4 different streams of income. The person that only has a single stream of income, where they know that this is the only place that this person is making money from, may or probably will not, especially if it's small amounts, especially if it's just a 1099 reconciling thing. People that are claiming they're getting tax audited from the IRS, what they're talking about is those automatic form letters that get sent out when you owe the government money. That's considered an audit, but that's not what we're talking about. This is a problem of language. They're not having a person sit there and like, oh my God, they made $20 on Twitch on Friday the 28th of November. Oh shit, they didn't claim that. Fucking get them. That's not what they're doing here.
Well, right, that would be automatic.
That would be automatic? Then why would that require
That's
an
what
audit?
you said. Well, that's why I'm saying you're wrong.
Why am I wrong?
If it would be automatic, then every single person that got any money from Twitch whatsoever,
it is mostly,
would be the government would audit them.
And when they receive a letter, from the IRS saying you are being quote unquote audited, it is generally speaking an automatic form letter saying that you owe the government X amount of dollars because you didn't claim it on your taxes for X year.
But they don't get everyone. If it was automated, it would be simple. They would get every single.
They would get everyone. Because it's because it's not all automated, because not every single person is under these conditions that we're talking about.
You wouldn't have to be under the conditions. You're saying that I would require. Let me finish. You're saying that my situation, if I have multiple sources of incomes, might require an audit because it's more complex. But the person who's purely receiving money from Twitch, that would all be automated, correct?
It probably is. I have no reason to doubt it is.
That would mean that anyone that's on some of these platforms, OnlyFans, Twitch, YouTube, etc., every single one of them would never be skipping out on any taxes because it's all automated. So even if they failed to record $20, the government would be like, a computer would spit out at the government's end.
And that's what mostly happens.
But it doesn't, because a lot of people,
happens.
It does. No, that's not true, because what I'm telling you is there's an awful lot of people that do things like this that don't report it and get away with it. And if it was automated, none of them would be able to do that. And what I'm telling you is, while it is true that there is some automation, there's also human interaction at the IRS that is required to do these things. And I'm telling you that, like, we'll see what happens. I don't want to take up all your time on this topic. You got 9 more minutes.
Fair enough.
Or we'll give you 15 more minutes. But I'll just say this. We'll see which one of us is right. I predict that we won't see the big dogs paying much more taxes. I think that they lobby, that they'll continue to use loopholes, and they'll continue to be able, almost at the exact same clip they are now, to avoid paying taxes, and that more people will get audits that are in those lower income brackets. In fact, Republicans, even one Republican at least, actually put in an amendment saying that these increased agents shouldn't be allowed to go after people making $250,000 a year. And of course, the Democrats wanted nothing to do with it.
They shouldn't be allowed to go after people to make 250. 250 is a lot of money.
Yes. Okay. Well, then the Democrats could have capped it lower than that, 100.
But what?
Why not say that?
Because they don't agree with you. They don't agree with you ideologically to say that they can't ever audit a person that makes less than that. Ideologically,
right?
No. Ideologically, they don't agree with that. That would prevent them from doing it entirely. But you're trying to say that that's.
They already have enough agents for that. They already have enough agents for that. That's what you said.
I didn't say that they have enough agents to go after every single thing. I said it's mostly automated, and as you said, they're not actually capturing everybody, but it's mostly.
Yeah. Well, I enjoy. We'll see who's right. I'm out there telling you, audience that's not really rich, don't be surprised when you and more of your friends get audited. And all this talk of no, trust us. It's just necessary to go after the big dogs. But you take the discussion where you want. I don't want to dominate. No,
I think we've commented in past. We've said our piece. So I wasn't expecting to convince you. I just wanted to debate. So
no, it's fine. I didn't think it was. I thought it was a worthwhile discussion. I just think definitely. I don't trust that, like, the same agents that allow these people, or that are incapable of getting these wealthy people today, or allow them or whatever, all of a sudden with 40,000 more agents, it's like, now we got them. I don't believe it.
I don't think I don't think it has to be perfect to be beneficial. I'll just put it that way. If they're able to go after 30 more people, not 30 more people. Well, actually, if it's billionaires, that's going to require a lot of agents. But so if they go after 30 more billionaires, right, because of their expanded thing, I think that's worth it.
Not if they go after 300,000 more 50,000-aires.
I don't think that's what's going to happen, though. I have no reason to believe that.
We'll see. No. Did you go ahead? You still got time. Whatever you want to talk about.
What, I got another 10 minutes?
Yeah, I mean, I think we started. I have us recording at 53 minutes, so we got you go till 8:30. How's that sound? And then I'll go till 9:30, and
that's fine.
Yeah, so 15 minutes.
No, I guess we could call it here and go on to the Jan 6 stuff, Jan 6 FBI, whatever. Unless you have a direct question for me before we go to that.
No, I will say this before we get to January 6th. It's kind of peripherally what you were talking about. The impetus is that you wanted to talk about policy as opposed to issues of corruption. I would contend that talking about corruption is a priori to policy, because no matter what our discussions would be on immigration or on tax codes and things like that, if your vote doesn't count because there's corruption, then you better hope that the people in charge just happen to agree with you, because otherwise it doesn't matter how articulate you are. If your ability to persuade people won't matter because the system is rigged.
I mean, that's fair. And just for a point of clarity, so that I think things get lost in translation through text all the time. So It's not that I didn't want to talk about January 6th. Clearly, I'm talking about it, right? I also care about policy, and I want to see if people to my right and I can agree with on anything, right? That's what I want to know. I want to know how much bridges can we build. And that's why I wanted to talk about this first before doing another thing, because we can debate corruption and politics and ideology all day. We can talk about our own biases or whatever. That's not, to me, really necessarily accomplishing much as we could maybe say, hey, we actually agree on a couple of issues. Let's work on those issues we agree on so that we can actually make, America better or whatever.
But we can't make America better if us agreeing is irrelevant.
Well, no, it's not irrelevant. It's only irrelevant if you believe that the entire system is so irredeemably corrupt that you want to see it all come down. And if that's the case, well, there's no point in discussing anything, because then at that point you should just take up arms, right? Like that's only true on extremely what's the word I'm looking for? Only extremely divisive topics. So, for example, let's take me and you could argue. Let's just say a hypothetical topic. Let's say you're like, I'm for Medicare for all, and I say, well, I'd like to see a more free market decision. Both of those are moral positions. I would take it on good faith that both of us want people to have health care. We want people to be healthy. We just have a disagreement on how to get there. Right.
But those are policies that you could see reasonable people of all different backgrounds disagreeing. It's like, okay,
for sure,
fair enough, right? Now, a policy of like, we should execute Hispanic people, that's fucking crazy. That's only going to be allowed to pass if there's insane corruption, right? But what I'm saying is those policies that it's like 40-60, 50-50, reasonable things, Medicare for all and things like that. Like, if there is corruption that is allowed to affect our elections so much that a select few of people could basically pick and choose the people that will be crafting policies, then it doesn't really matter, right? You better hope that whoever gets elected agrees with Medicare for all.
So but to me, if you believe that is how far corrupt the system is, then the only logical conclusion that you can do from that is to take up arms to fix the system. Because no matter who you vote for, no matter what you do, then if you believe it's that corrupt, then there's no other recourse other than violence to fix it.
That's not true. That's terrible. That's terrible. You don't say. If I can convince you of one thing tonight, I hope it's that's incorrect. I say this all the time. No matter how bleak things get, violence is almost never the answer. And for every one time that violence is the answer, there is 100,000, if not more, times that people claimed that it was the answer and that isn't. None of the situations, as bleak as it sounds right now, warrants any sort of political violence on the left, right, or anywhere in between. It does not. There are other things that we can do. For example, if we wake people, like, for example, let's say that I hypothetically can convince you that the FBI is corrupt and they helped steal an election.
Okay.
Right? Well, then the solution to that is to make sure that the FBI can't corrupt and steal another election. You don't need violence to do that.
But if they're not going to be able to, then they only answered it as revolution.
But again, right? Who says they're not able to? Like, you're defaulting. You're like, well,
I'm
basically what you're.
I'm saying,
let me ask you a question real quick.
Okay. No, I was just going to say.
I was just going to. Please,
sorry, we're my bad. So what I'm saying is, like, if someone believes that it is hopelessly corrupt, and convincing other people isn't going to fix that corruption, that they're not going to be able to dislodge these people through the ballot, then it's going to be the bullet, right? That's the way I look at it. So I don't think that that's where we are. And and that's why I want to debate policy, because if somebody thinks that they are that corrupt, then I don't think that we can actually build bridges, because they don't fundamentally have any trust in the system whatsoever. So it's a moot point.
The difference is this, right? You're saying if there is no hope, like theoretically, we could see in a crystal ball and it's like nothing you could ever do will change this unless you use violence, then violence is necessary, right? But that's not the way things work. You're just assuming that if there's corruption enough to affect policy and culture in the way that I'm suggesting, then the only possible solution would be violence. I don't agree with that. I think that waking people up and convincing people to join your side and to take steps to end the corruption are things that can and will be effective.
Okay.
Now, at the level, you could say, well, couldn't you say the same with policy? Well, not really, right? Because, for example, part of the corruption might be controlling the narrative and convincing it through propaganda, a plurality of people of something, right? That propaganda is easier to expose when you're exposing the corruption and propaganda itself than winning a policy position so much, because we already agreed, like you would have to win that policy position like 95%. It would have to be a no shit type thing. Like, of course, we should be against X thing. And if the government didn't, that would wake people up.
But I mean, isn't okay? So, okay, that's funny. Okay, I think I think you understand why more so that I wanted to do a policy thing first rather than this. I like going up back and forth. So yeah.
I wish that we had a system where our voices mattered more and we could spend all of our time talking about these policies. I really do. I think that policy, I find the conversations to be interesting. I don't claim to be a policy wonk or anything like that. I'm opinionated, but the thing that's more uplifting about policy is most of the time when you're talking to someone, even if you massively disagree, you can understand that your motivations are very similar. Like, we want people to be healthy. We don't want people to be, to suffer. That's the truth. Like, even, and my audience will hate me for this, you could be a moral person and be a socialist, right? Like, I disagree with that, but I believe that most people, that are looking at it through a policy lens, and they're looking at a socialist type policy, like, free education, send the students back their tuition checks, refunding student loans, something like that. That doesn't make you a shitty person for believing that. I disagree that that's a good solution, but that's sort of uplifting. That's conversations you could have around the dinner table with friends. Yeah. And you don't hate each other. Corruption's different, because if you get someone that truly is like, yeah, I think you're evil, and I think that the boot should be brought down in your throat, it's hard to overcome that. It's hard to be like, well, we can still be friends, right? That's tough. So I do think that there's a time and a place to talk about policy. I think that it occurs a lot. And I think that the issue that I focus on the most being corruption is, I think it's a priori to these policies being enacted. And I also think that there's not enough people that are talking about it in an in-depth way, as I hope to be able to convince you when we get to this topic.
Okay. I think that's fair.
Okay. So we're good on your topic. Do you have any closing statements? Okay.
No, right. Let me close at the end of the show. That's fine.
Fair, no problem. All right, so the time is 8:22. We'll try to wrap up by 9:20, if that's fair, and then we'll do closing statements and everything. Then I'll get down and put up my Christmas tree. This is the plan here this week. So, all right. So a precursor for what in here is I regularly retweet things or tweet out things. I tweeted something, I think I retweeted something about January 6th, and you and another person got into a discussion. And in that, the discussion of zip ties came up. I would guess that you're a person that thinks that January 6th was a big deal or an insurrection or something like that. And this person was, go ahead.
I was just saying, I ate crow on that. 100% I was wrong. So,
Right. But there's a few stylistic things that I think is important to talk about, because you said, well, they brought zip ties, and this person said, no, they didn't. And you said, you're a liar and you're living in a bubble. And then he was able to provide documents from the court trial that showed that actually he was right. Which gets to why I wanted to have this conversation, because two reasons. One, I think the hubris of so many people that just buy the mainstream narrative on this, so much so that they don't say, well, I don't think so, I think X. Instead, it jumps right to, you're a liar, you're living in a bubble. And the truth is that you are grossly misinformed about what happened there. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, I hope to convince you that maybe you should look more into these things before you take that step, because I think that you're being misled and not seeing both sides of the argument when you make statements like that. So that's why I wanted to have this discussion.
More than fair. And to talk about, like, I simply didn't see that court case because that's not one I was following. I did not follow that case. I saw the zip ties. The first thing that I saw, well, he's got zip ties. He's probably in there to kidnap people. And I didn't bother to look up Look it up again. So it's not necessarily a thing where it's like a bubble necessarily, although I will eat crow and say it might be to a degree. But it's just I was totally unaware of that, and that's why I ate crow on it. So. And I apologize to that guy for calling him a liar. Like,
he did, and he was calling you a shithead. It wasn't like that dude was Mr. Respectable. He was like, "F you. I hope you're a piece of shit." Blah blah blah. So it wasn't like that guy was super. I get that. I'm not saying, but no, I am saying I truly believe. I truly believe you thought he was in a bubble and was lying, and you're wrong. You're wrong about that.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's what I want to do. I want to start out and ask you, before we get into the specifics, let's lay some framework here. If the FBI is an agency as the most powerful, you would agree that they're basically the most powerful, if not one of the most powerful law enforcement agencies in the history of the world. You'd agree with that?
No, I don't think I would.
Could you give me an example of a law enforcement agency that had more power and more tools?
I would say that maybe that was true prior to the and I'm not going to remember the years this happened. It was in the 60s. It was after Hoover. After Hoover, all those reforms came down, and they actually had more people looking over their stuff. Before that, they
might have to do with power. So there's oversight over the power, but
they had.
When I say power, I mean things.
They had some of their tools taken away. They were not able to spy on Americans. They had all these things done that actually curbed that power.
They're not?
Not in the same way. Like I wouldn't compare the FBI to like the Stasi, right? Like the Stasi is more powerful than the FBI right now. That's what I'm saying.
Let's just say in the United States, let's say that they're more well funded than the Stasi. They're more competent than the Stasi, right? In that the Stasi kind of fell apart, the Soviet Union, right? Like,
sure. I mean, but then the Nazis had the SS and their secret police as well. And then we're not under
let's limit it to the United States.
We're not limited.
But that's not what I'm talking about. Let's just limit it to the United States. Is there a law enforcement mechanism in the United States more powerful or above the FBI?
Probably the NSA doesn't do law enforcement actions. The DEA is pretty fucking powerful too. I'll give you
domestically,
that one.
The FBI.
I'll give you that one. It's not worth it.
And so, would it be a problem if that agency was politicized and engaged in a double standard and enforcement?
It would be for any government agency to happen, even on the state level. There's a reason why I don't like sheriffs a lot of the times, okay? But that's true of any government agency. If it becomes politicized, it needs to have reforms, and that's just what it is.
Okay, good. So I just want to get that in the record. And then the last question I get asked before we jump in is, do you think the FBI is politicized?
No, I don't think it's politicized. Well, okay. Well, hold on. Wait. So I might define politicizing differently than you. So why don't you tell me what politicizing means to you, and then I can say whether I agree with you or not.
That they have a side that they like more and are self-interested in preserving their own power and advocating for politicians and people that are in that side.
So I think that's two separate things. So every single agency is self-interested in order to maintain its power. DA does it. Police departments do it on the local state level. That like government agencies do it. The Army, the Air Force exists because they wanted to break away from the Army and have its own little thing. So I think that's two separate things. I think, yes, on that one, they are very much self-interested and they want to preserve whatever power it is that they have. That's true of all agencies. That's true of everybody. I do not believe that they are partisan with that. I don't believe they are like inherently like anti-Trump. Like they don't back Democrats more than Republicans. They don't back Republicans more than Democrats in any of this.
Well, it's not just a Republican Democrat thing. You would admit that, like, even if they like Mitch McConnell or they like Mitt Romney, but they actively tried to sabotage Trump, you wouldn't say, well, that's okay because they like Republicans.
I don't believe that they try to actively sabotage Trump.
I understand that, but I'm just saying you're not going to make that argument down the road, right? You're not going to say, well, even if they sabotage Trump, they like McConnell.
No.
Gotcha.
That's not what I just don't think they're politicized because I don't think that that's where they're at. But I just wanted to make sure that we're on the same page.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that. It's clearly where they're at. I mean, they spy. Have they ever spied on a president of the United States previous to Trump?
To be determined.
Right, but there's no public knowledge of that, correct?
Not that I am aware of. There might be some implications with JFK, but yeah.
Do you think that if the FBI is investigating presidential candidates or presidents, that they should have to be very much by the book and understand that this is going to be one of the most politicized investigations
yes,
ever?
And anybody that was not by the book, and unless it was like, okay, so there's a difference between malice and negligence, and negligence to the point of being like, I don't know what you would say, like objective incompetence, where they can't do their job at all, right? Would you agree with that? Like, there's incompetence, there's
I agree.
There's gross incompetence, there's gross negligence, and then there's, you know, actually being like partisans and going after people and that sort of thing. I would say
it's one of my least favorite arguments, because the even the IG report itself is so striking about the misbehaviors of the FBI's investigations of Hillary and Trump. To claim that it's incompetence is actually worse and more of an argument to disband the FBI, because to be incompetent beyond the scale of second graders would mean that we shouldn't trust this agency for anything.
What I would say is that there is not evidence that they are incompetent to the level that the entire agency needs to be taken down. There might be some incompetence on some people's parts where they should no longer be in the FBI.
Like leadership.
Leadership, or, you know, even somebody's lower down that was like the Susan, is it Susan, not Susan Page, but, you know, the Page and the whatever, the
Lisa Page, Peter Strzok.
I'm bad with names. Okay, I know.
That's fine. I know who you're talking about. Lisa Page. Yeah.
So Lisa Page and whatever the other guy's name was. So
Peter Strzok. Yep.
Yeah. So those people, they're no longer at the FBI, correct? Both of them have been kicked.
That is correct.
Okay. So that's what I would say. I would say, like, when you show that you as an individual are that bad at your job that you don't understand optics and all the other stuff, and you do something that's really bad, you should be fired. Now, if you're
what if their leadership knew that? What if their leadership knew that was occurring and didn't fire him until the public became aware of it?
I would say that's bad too.
Okay, so that'd be Comey, that'd be Wray, that'd be Rosenstein, that'd be McCabe.
Sorry, there's a bug.
Baker. Right, that'd be all these people at the top. Okay, right. Let's just cut to brass tacks. Do you think, for example, I didn't plan on going here, but do you think that changing evidence to say the opposite of the truth, do you think that's incompetence or malice?
Changing things that didn't. I'm sorry, can you say it again? I got distracted by chat.
If you change evidence to say the opposite of the truth, do you think that you could say, well, that's incompetence? If you're a top FBI lawyer.
Probably malice, but I would have to know exactly what you're talking about. I have an idea of what you're talking about, but I wasn't like
Kevin Klein.
That wasn't what I thought we were going to be talking about today. So I didn't.
Right. That's fine. But Kevin Klein-Smith was a lawyer at the FBI who the FBI asked the CIA if Carter Page, who they had a FISA warrant against to spy on, if he had ever helped the CIA in investigations against Russians. The CIA responded, yes, he did. Yes, and Kevin Klein-Smith, the top lawyer at the FBI, said to no. That's malice, correct?
More than likely, yeah.
You think that's a big deal?
Sure. Maybe that person should be fired.
Should be fired. Is that it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, given the position, maybe there should be a criminal investigation to it, but I'm pretty sure there was. So
there was. What do you think? If it's proven that he did that, what should the punishment be for that?
I don't know. Whatever the current law of the book says. I wouldn't say like tar and feather the guy, but whatever. You know.
How about? Do you think he should lose his license to practice law?
Oh, that's a good one. That's not a legal thing. That's that's the American Bar Association. So that would be their determination.
But you think that they could remove it if he engaged in unethical behavior?
Yeah, if the American Bar Association determined that he engaged in unethical behavior, then he should. Then they have the thing to talk about.
They didn't. They let him. He's still allowed to practice law, but he got a slap on the wrist.
That's the American Bars Association's look at it, and the slap on the wrist could be any number of different things.
Right, but isn't that weird? Malice at the top level to spy on a president of the United States, and it's like, you get a little bit of probation and you're allowed to practice law. Seems strange.
No, I don't think it's strange.
I'll just go, but just so we get to January 6th, I'll just say,
let's talk
do you think the FBI, well, real quick before we get there, because you brought up, the only reason I bring this up, you brought up the FBI being able to spy on citizens. They can through the FISA court. The FISA court's acceptance rate is something like 99.7%.
No, Okay, to be clear, I'm saying it's not this overarching like Stasi like system. There's still checks and balances. They don't just get to, and we can talk about whether or not FISA is a rubber stamp court or not. There's reasons that might be the case, okay? But they're not just going and doing it. They're still going through a legal process that is supposed to help protect people's rights.
It's supposed to. Okay, right. It's supposed to, but it's basically a rubber stamp. Nonetheless, do you think that the FBI...
Okay, I'm gonna push back on that just for a second,
Sure.
the rubber stamp thing. So the kind of cases that are taken to the FISA court are done in such a methodical way that they only go to the FISA court with information that they know the FISA court will approve of.
That's not true. It has nothing to do with methodical nature. It could be because they're withholding information from the FISA court. For example, the inspector, real quick, the Inspector General Horowitz investigated not just the FISA court application of Carter Page, but also looked at 15 other cases. And in all 15 of those other cases that he looked at that weren't connected to Trump or Hillary Clinton, guess what he found? In every single one of all 15 that he looked at, the FBI had errors and omissions and behaved improperly. Every single time.
But there's a difference between behaving improperly, being incompetent, being malice, and being negligent. What information was left off? Like, these things matter, because if it's not very material to the situation, then it doesn't really matter.
It doesn't matter in the context that you're saying. You're saying there are checks and balances on them. But only when we saw a gross political case that was the highest profile case that the FBI was going to be involved in, did we then see the checks and balances said, oh shit, they're wrong every time.
I mean, 15 cases aren't every time. That's the thing.
15 out of 15 is every time that they looked at. 15 that
was looked at might have been another political thing, for all we know. It could have been political from the other side.
I'll just ask you this real quick. Do you think that the FBI should have to attempt to verify information before getting its FISA warrant to spy on a U.S. citizen?
Sure, why not?
Okay. Do you think that the threshold should be even higher if it's to spy on a presidential candidate's team or a president?
Well, the political nature of this is where the issue is, because the political nature of it is inherently, icky, right? But we can't just let people declare their candidacy so they can avoid investigations. That would that would be where I would say maybe not extra scrutiny and extra careful, but maybe like another check, like from the Attorney General.
You're not dumb. You understand that, like,
the Attorney General was the one that has to approve the political ones, right?
Right, but nonetheless, that's true.
Under
Holder?
Barr, under Holder, and under
Eric Holder. Yeah, right. Eric Holder approved to spy on Trump. Shocker.
Holder, Barr, not Susan Page.
The attorney. Well, Bill did not have to sign. The head of the FBI had to sign off on the warrant. So it was James Comey, and then once
I'm saying these are people that these are all political appointees. Okay, and we understand that they're political appointees, and that's the system that we have. And these are the kind of people that approve this stuff. That's the extra check. So if you want it to
nonetheless, that extra check exists anyways. There's already top brass that has to sign off on these FISA warrants. And what I'm saying is, you understand that the way these situations play out in real life, because of the potential for bad optics, that the threshold for spying, for example, on a president of the United States should be much higher than spying on an average person. The threshold should already be very high, right? We're talking about violating someone's Fourth and First Amendments. That should be very high to treat them as a foreign spy. But it's even higher when you're talking about doing so to a presidential candidate or a president. I'll just say this. Would it shock you to learn that the FBI did not even attempt to verify the FISA warrant or the Steele dossier until after they got their first FISA warrant?
Because they have to get the FISA warrant to actually go look into the allegations of the
So then you take back your statement. You take back your statement that they should have to verify information before they use it to get a FISA warrant. You take that back then.
Yeah, I would take that back, and it's not just because it's political. It's because there's certain things that you have to undergo the information. You have all this information, right? And sometimes that's going to require you to actually investigate to see if that information is true, and that's where the FISA warrant comes in.
Do you think that that's how law enforcement works, not just with the FBI, but also local law enforcement? That you have to investigate to see if something's true?
Yes, actually, that's how law enforcement works.
Well, congratulations to cheering for one of the most authoritarian systems imaginable. It's not any accusation.
It's not any accusation.
Yes, it is.
It depends on the situation. But like I said, there's some information that you might get that will require you to investigate the person that has the claim on it before you actually prove that it's true or not. And then that's where the checks and balances come in.
Trump wins in 2024, and then he pays a law firm to go out and find a Chinese spy that says Joe Biden likes to sniff the hair of underage girls in China and boys.
We already had this debate.
It should be investigated. That should be investigated. That's what you're saying.
We already had this debate.
I don't remember, but I don't remember, but okay, I don't remember, but I just want to get that in record. So you're acknowledging that any accusation of that sort of nature, even if you paid for it, that should result in a FISA warrant to spy on a presidential campaign.
It depends on, okay, say what your example is again, because I cut you off before I heard the full thing, because I'm sure that there's something here. Like, go say it again,
Joe Biden sniffs the hair of little girls in China, and he's also colluding with China to try to win elections and get business deals.
The colluding in elections and business deals probably would have to be looked at. The other stuff seems specious, but that's how these things work, right? So that was some of the. That's not how it works. That's analogous to the dossier, right? The dossier had like the P tapes and like other shit in it, and they had other things of like, hey, X, Y, and Z person was like here at this time, and you're like, oh shit, well we were there at that time, and we saw that person talk or whatever, so we have to investigate this.
That's not how it works. And you and every other Democrat will freak out if this ever happens in the inverse. If ever sycophantic people at the FBI don't put me in those.
Don't put me in that.
Yes.
Be more in good faith, because I'm telling you what my position is.
No, so you're telling me that if we have FBI agents that say that we need an insurance policy to stop Joe Biden, right? And those agents that have exhibited malice and bias so much to the point where the Inspector General admitted that the top
different things. You're combining different things. Yes, you are. So
I'm taking an analogous situation.
I am saying that we have to separate the two, okay? The analogous situation, you're combining all these things together to make it one cohesive thing. If we're talking just about the Steele dossier, that Steele dossier should have been investigated because of the allegations therein, right? A similar thing should happen with Biden. Should there be like they're trying to steal the election or whatever, right? Those should be investigated because the allegations are super fucking serious, right? But then the other angle of it, of saying, hey, we have to have these things about the insurance policy or what have you, that is separate from the Steele dossier itself, because the Steele dossier came through other methods.
Because I'm saying that in this situation that we saw, if it was as close as we could apply it to, you wouldn't be saying, hey, it's no problem that the FBI agents doing this said they wanted an insurance policy. And it's no problem that these were just rumors that were paid for by Trump. And it's no problem that they couldn't verify the information and used it to get 4 FISA warrants. If the accusation is serious, then we need to spy. And it's no problem that it got leaked to the press all the time.
When it's something of serious like that, it needs to be investigated. How that investigation goes, we can disagree on whether or not it was a proper investigation, but when an allegation is as serious as that, when it goes to the heart of American power, then you have to investigate it. That's how you prove that they're wrong.
I'll say this. I'll say that either you're bad faith and that you're full of shit, and that if this happened in the inverse, you would say this is corruption, this is abuse. You'd be listening to CNN and the New York Times saying this is a Stasi president. Please, but just let me finish. You would be listening to them and people parroting that, and the Democrats saying this is abuse, this is corruption. We need to impeach these people. We need to investigate them. Or let's say that's not the case. Your system and idea of what our FBI should be and what investigation should be are so fucked up that it would literally prioritize every single candidate ever paying anyone to make an accusation about their opponent, because the FBI would constantly have to spy on them for a year because
no one said anything about spying. Either way, I said investigate. Okay,
they did. That is spying. That is spying. Getting a FISA warrant is spying.
I know, but we have to be clear here. So when you said investigate, I wasn't talking about the FISA warrant going through and spying on people. I said investigate it. Find out if some of the information is true. Look into the matters that are there and apply for your things that you need to apply for in order to do that. That's the checks and balances there. That's what should happen.
Right. And the FBI said, right. For example, we can see that the FBI failed those checks and balances and systems over and over. One of the things they have to do is verify. Not a big deal, right?
No, I'm saying I don't agree with you, but that's fine.
Did you read the IG report?
I did.
So they failed to do the Woods procedures over 200 times.
Okay.
That's they're required to do. They failed to accurately report to the FISA court what the primary subsource said.
Okay.
That they're required to do.
Okay.
They changed evidence to say the material opposite of what they said. They're required not to do that, right? Nonetheless, let's get to January 6th. I'm glad we could set the framework here. So January 6th, you think it was an insurrection?
I think there was elements there that were trying to foment an insurrection. Whether or not every single person that was there was part of that or not is debatable. Not every person there was there to be an insurrection. A lot of them were there as a protest that got riled up to be a mob.
Okay, how would you define insurrection? Like trying to overthrow the levers of power in some way?
Yeah, it would be stopping the transfer of peaceful transfer of power between a duly elected American official through violent means. That's a simple definition.
Does it have to be violence, or could it be intimidation as well?
I think intimidation could be part of it. So yeah, we'll say both. We can say both.
In other words, you never actually have to punch the senator in the face. You could just make them fearful that you may do something like that to stop what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, a terroristic threat would include this.
It's not actual violence, but it'd be intimidation.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And the last thing, the precursor question I have for this is, would you also say that stopping the transfer of power, you could deem something an insurrection if, say, they wanted to execute a politician, kill a politician? Like, for example, if they wanted to kill Mike Pence, that even if they didn't stop the transfer of power, they just said, we hate you because you did this. Would you also consider that an insurrection?
In terroristic threats, I think rise to that level. Even if we're just saying they're blowing off steam, I don't think you should blow off steam in that way. I think that's very.
But you would say that you would consider that an attempted insurrection if they were legitimately trying to physically harm a leader.
Yeah, I would say that physically trying to harm a leader during the transfer of power or topple a government or whatever. Yes.
Okay. Would you say that the FBI and law enforcement should not act in double standards in this country?
What do you mean by that?
I mean, would you say that they should follow the law to the best of their ability and not have a double standard where they treat one political side? You already said you don't think they're partisan, correct?
I don't think they're partisan. They're not treating one political side differently than the other.
So you would expect to see that if there are incidents on the left where they engaged in violence or intimidation in order to change the peaceful transition of power, you would assume that the FBI would treat those similarly, correct?
I would say that the FBI handles federal cases. So if it's a federal instance, for example, the what was it, the 2016 Antifa thing, they arrested like 300 people or so and charged them and put them into prison similarly. Yeah.
When was this?
2017. Though the Antifa Stop Trump or whatever it was fucking rally in DC when they punched.
I don't know. Let's take some. So do you think that the threshold exacerbated when they broke into the Capitol January 6th?
Do I think that
that led to an increased threshold of an increased response? That it was potentially an insurrection?
I don't know where you're going with this, but yes.
Well, of course you don't. So what if I was to tell you that Democrats broke into the Capitol as well in order to stop a peaceful transition of power? If that situation occurred, even if no violence, I'm asking you, even if no violence occurred,
but if they know when this was.
I will tell you in 1 second. I'm just saying, if there was a situation where Democrats broke past police in order to intimidate.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
In the Capitol.
You're talking about. I know what you're talking about. You're talking about the Kavanaugh hearing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. No.
Is that an insurrection?
No, because it was not there to overturn a government. It was there to disrupt a hearing.
No,
that's not the same thing.
It was there to stop a Supreme Court justice from being confirmed.
No,
yes, it was.
No.
You're telling me with a straight face right now that the people that were breaking into the Capitol were not attempting to stop the confirmation.
They were protesting. They were protesting, and they were trying to disrupt that, but they were not trying. It's not anything for lawful transfer of power. It wasn't designed to topple the government. It wasn't any of those things.
What do you mean? What do you mean lawful transfer of power? He was a Supreme Court justice. They were trying to prevent him from becoming
lawful transfer of power
justice.
In this instance is talking about transferring power politically from one person to another person.
So it's not an insurrection.
A disruption of noise and other things like of that nature to stop a hearing is not the same thing as going into the Capitol.
They used intimidation. They broke past police in an unlawful way, and they sought to stop a lawful government process to one of the three separate branches of government. Sure, they're analogous.
No, I don't think
what you said under what you said, your definition of insurrection would be. They are. Yes, they are.
No, because
they
that's
used
not
intimidation to try to stop the peaceful transition of power.
This isn't a transition.
They were transitioning from one Supreme Court.
No.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
Is transition of power only through presidency?
It's political.
Right. And the nomination of a Supreme Court justice?
No.
How many branches of government do we have?
3.
Are those all political?
No. Well, they're not supposed to be.
You don't think court appointees are part of the political process?
They're not political in the sense that you're voting for a fucking Supreme Court justice.
You're voting to confirm them. Just like you're voting to confirm electors.
The general people aren't voting for the Supreme Court justice. It's a convoluted process to design.
No, it's that's a distinction that doesn't matter. Why does that matter? Why would that distinction? So your argument is we can't consider something a political process if individuals aren't voting. This makes no sense, right? Like, there's no reason that distinction would apply whether or not there's an insurrection.
The Supreme Court
that makes no sense.
The Supreme Court is supposed to be a non-political. Supposed to be as
what
non-political.
Does that have
as
anything to do with?
Because
what
it's
does
not
that have anything to do with anything? Okay, so for example, if people said we don't like the Dobbs decision, the overturning of Roe v. Wade, so therefore we will kill Supreme Court justices until they rule in the way we want. Is that an insurrection?
That person would be making a terroristic threat, but that would not be an insurrection because it's not targeting the entire government as it was for this that we're talking about. January 6th.
How many branches of government are there?
Those people.
Real quick, how many branches of government are there?
No, I'm not going down this rabbit hole again. I already said there's
3 branches of government. Can you explain to me? I'll leave you post. We'll wait if you want. You said that January 6th was threatening the entire government.
Yes.
Can you show me that they were threatening Supreme Court justices? Go ahead.
They were threatening government, the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature.
So so if you only threaten the executive, no insurrection. If you only threaten the legislative, no insurrection.
It's targeting the whole government because what they wanted to do, what these people, you think you got me, but you don't.
I do.
You don't, because this is dumb. It's not analogous. Now I will say that the people that if the person that threatened to kill Kavanaugh should be charged with terrorism, and that person should be in prison. Probably, maybe not necessarily their entire life. I believe in redemption, but they should be in prison for that.
Okay, May 30th, 2020, a bunch of violent lefties lit fires, they didn't bring zip ties, they brought Molotov cocktails, they burned down a guard station, they attacked the White House in an attempt to physically remove Donald Trump. Insurrection?
Yes.
Did the FBI have an analogous response?
I wouldn't be able to answer that because I just assumed that they did.
Take a guess.
I would say that he probably had somewhat of a response since, CPB and a bunch of other military.
I said analogous.
Okay. I assume.
Did they have an analogous response?
I assume that they did. But you can tell me I'm wrong. Because I didn't look into it. Because I assume that the government's going to do the correct thing.
I will just say this, right? I'll tell you briefly why they didn't. But if they didn't, would you say that's a problem?
Potentially, but I have to know what the differences are.
I'll tell you the difference. I'll tell you the differences, but I just want to know if you're admitting that was an insurrection. You've admitted May 30th, 2020 was an insurrection.
Sure.
So I just want, if the FBI did not treat that in a similar manner of the insurrection of January 6th, you would say that's a big problem.
I would need to know what those differences were.
I will tell you what the differences are, but I'm saying hypothetically.
Those differences matter.
Okay. So let's say one of the differences was that they didn't have one of the largest task force in the history of the agency. In fact, the largest task force in the history of the agency.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying.
But I just want to say, I'm not going to believe at this point.
Why do you assume that they don't?
Because they don't.
Leftist
because it's obvious, because they've admitted it. The amount of resources that the FBI has put into January 6th is incredible. And it's still ongoing. It's not just that the FBI is putting resources into it. It's the amount of convictions they brought. It's the amount of tenacity they went off. It's the charges that they filed. It's the treatment of the prisoners. It's the connection to committees. It is the release to information to the media and everything. It's not even close. And I'm not going to belabor this point to you because everyone watching, even left-wingers, knows, yeah, dude, it's absurd to even pretend that the FBI's response to May 30th, 2020 was similar to January 6th. It's not even close. All of us know it, and you're making yourself look bad by pretending that you don't know that.
That's fine.
Okay, so we can see then that you think it would be a big deal. I suggest looking it up and what their response was to May 30th, 2020. By the way, instead of bringing
assume, but that's fine.
Right,
I just know this wasn't what we were supposed to
guys,
talk about. So
sure it is. We're talking about January 6th. Now let's skip it.
I specifically did direct research about January 6th direct things, not analogous things. So I can't answer these questions because they're not.
Well, part of it was January 6th and the FBI corruption was what I said the topic would be, right?
Sure. And I looked up January 6th in regards to this. So I looked up
Don't you think the FBI looking at analogous situations and enacting differently would be heavily suggesting that there's potential corruption?
It would depend on why those differences exist.
All right, so then
and how many people were arrested the day of? Like, that's another thing. If they go arrested most of the people the day of, then it doesn't fucking matter. Listen, why would they need? Why would the FBI need a giant fucking tax force to go round up people if they made most of the between every single not military, every single law enforcement agency or quasi law enforcement agency at the was it January 30th? Is that what it was? Is that the date?
Yeah, whatever, they didn't.
They didn't make all those arrests? Okay.
They didn't lock everyone up that day. No, they didn't.
They're not going to lock everybody. They haven't locked everyone up from Jan 6, so that's a non sequitur. That doesn't matter.
Over 3,000 people, right? But nonetheless, the point is this. You're now transitioning away from you're like, well, this is out of bounds. This wasn't what I prepared for. By the way, just real quick, while we're talking about what we prepared for, did you tell me what the topic was I would be debating that you talked about?
No, I did not. That's why
so then it comes off a little hollow.
No,
saying this wasn't what I prepared for.
No. I'm saying that I cannot answer these questions because I don't know everything piece of information that goes there. So I have to take your word for it right now so we can move on rather than get hung up on weeds. That's all I'm saying.
Let's move on. Okay, to January 6th proper. So forgetting the double standard of the FBI's treatment. Would you say that the FBI had foreknowledge that this insurrection, as you call it, was going to occur?
So based on everything that I was able to look up and the time frames that I was able to look up, no. Not at least in the way that a lot of people are seeming to say that they did online and even some pundits. So what it appears to me from everything that I've been able to find is that there has been some people that reached out to the FBI. One of the people was a lower level member of the Oath Keepers that called the FBI. I'm like, hey, Rhodes is saying some weird shit, man. Like, you should look into this. And the FBI's like, that's not enough to go on, so we can't. And then a lot of the other people turned state evidence after the fact. And that's when they started to go interview more of these people. And there was maybe some give-me's here and there between like the Proud Boys and like some other Oath Keeper people, but not anything that said, hey, we're showing up on January 6th to do the things that we did there.
Before I get to that point specifically, have they since found information that they were saying we're showing up to have an insurrection January 6th?
I think they have since found that information, but that is after the fact. So you can't say that they knew ahead of time that it was happening.
Okay.
And the stuff that they had.
The audience,
sorry, go ahead. I had the burp, so go ahead.
Just to let the audience know that I believe the FBI said they had over 18 informants embedded at the time talking to them before January 6th from the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers. He says a low-level guy from the Oath Keepers. It was their vice president is who it was.
No, it was a vice president. Just to be clear, it's a vice president. He talked about a specific thing about the Portland guy that they were going to go into Portland and do something. That was what I've been able to find out through reading different reports. And then there was another guy that was there, and I can tell you that guy's name because I have that written down. So hold on. So Mick Witter is the vice president person. And then a nascent plot to ambush someone affiliated with the leftist movement known as Antifa in the Pacific Northwest. And then another person by the name of Mr. Rashid is Abdullah Rashid called the FBI and told them that he was worried about Rhodes' rhetoric during one of their meetings.
So
and I can send you the link to that one.
Right. What we see is it wasn't just low level people. It was actually the vice president, and those people. The FBI has used their testimony. Let me finish. Their FBI has used these informants' testimony at trials of people in the Oath Keepers and Proud Boys to say that they were actively planning a insurrection. They also said that they had been in constant communication with many of these informants for months leading up into. So your claim is that they were in communications with these high-level people at the Oath Keepers, but the Oath Keepers, for example, this vice president of the Oath Keeper, either A, was unaware as the vice president that they were plotting an insurrection?
It's not that they were unaware. It's that that's not the information that they shared with the FBI. So as according to this article that I read, as part of the cooperation with the government, Mr. Witter told the FBI about a nascent plot by Oath Keepers to ambush someone affiliated with the leftist movement known as Antifa in the Pacific Northwest. According to one person familiar with the matter, the FBI had sought to use more aggressive investigation techniques to pursue the case, but lacked the evidence to move forward, the person said. So they were told about this, looked into it, didn't want to violate people's Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment rights, and then pulled back because they didn't have enough information to actually go through and do a proper, a better investigation.
Has the vice president for the Oath Keepers been arrested and charged with committing an insurrection?
Yes, after the fact. So when you have, this is why the timeline matters, right? So if you have just talk, right? We can all blow off steam. It might violate Twitch toss to say, like, I want to do X, Y, or Z, right? But according to the government, I'm allowed to do that. And then, but when you try to actually do it, when you go through and put into action those words, then it becomes an issue of legality. And that's when you can start to charge people. So my question
is, the vice president of the Oath Keepers, you're saying he has been arrested for the crimes of January 6th?
No, I don't think so. I think he's because he's turned state evidence.
So what? Other people have turned state evidence and still get charged with lesser crimes.
A lot of people, it depends on the plea deals they make. So
I just want to be clear. This is what you're suggesting.
Tarrio also turned state evidence at some point.
I just want to give the narrative that you're giving here to excuse this. Here's the narrative. That 8 people were embedded with the Proud Boys. I think there were 6 or so that were with the Oath Keepers. Let's take the Oath Keepers specifically. The vice president of the Oath Keepers, the FBI says for months was in communications with them. For months before January 6th was in constant communication with them. He was telling them as an informant that there was potential violence that was going to occur in places like Portland. But he was aware that there was an insurrection about to occur, but strategically did not tell the FBI about the insurrection, instead telling them about other lesser violence that was going to go in Portland.
I'm not saying that he didn't tell them. I'm saying that just telling them that this information is happening isn't necessarily going to be enough for them to actually go through and investigate it if we care about people's civil rights.
So do you believe now that the FBI was aware through informants that there was an insurrection being planned on January 6th?
The amount of evidence that they had did not give them enough legal.
It's not the question I asked. That's not the question I asked.
It's important to this point because the timeline matters.
I'm asking a very specific question. You can elaborate after you give a yes or no. Right? My question is, do you think the FBI was aware via informants that there was plotting of an insurrection on January 6th?
They were aware of possible violence, but they could not determine whether or not that is blowing off steam or if that is actual plans. They were
the plans that they were aware of. Do you think had those plans been enacted, it would have been tantamount to an insurrection?
Probably.
Okay, there we go.
But it depends on what they know. Like I don't know what exactly they know. That's the issue.
That's why I'm asking you. It doesn't make sense because what you seemed to suggest beforehand was, like, I'm going through what your possible excuses are. It seemed like the first excuse was, well, the vice president of the Oath Keepers didn't know the Oath Keepers were plotting an insurrection.
No,
that seemed nonsense. Let me finish. Which you specifically said that's not what I'm saying, right?
I'm not that's not what I'm
being unfair. Right. You're saying that's not. So I was like, okay, that would be nonsensical. So I'm glad you're not saying that. And then it seemed to me what you were suggesting was, but this vice president of the Oath Keepers, what he did was he didn't tell them about all the language about January 6th and all the planning of January 6th. No, instead, he told them about Portland.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the information that I have that I'm able to reference is that specific plot. So I don't know exactly what the FBI was told and how much information that they actually had. I can say that based on Mr. Abdullah Rashid's information from what he told press is that he told and called the FBI and said that he was worried about the rhetoric that was being done and some of the things that they were talking about doing. And the FBI is like, that is not enough information to actually go through and investigate. we're sorry. And then afterwards, when the actual insurrection happened, or the actual plot, or whatever you want to fucking call it, happened with Oath Keepers on the ground helping lead charges or what have you, when that actually happened, then they went back to him like, okay, we need all that information that we couldn't investigate now, because now it's an actual crime that we can investigate.
Okay, so now you're saying that, okay, it's most likely that, yeah, the FBI heard that there was a possible insurrection being planned. They just couldn't act upon it.
They could not act upon it due to people's civil rights. Correct.
You're full of shit. You're full of shit, and I'll explain why. Right?
Fine. I mean,
because the idea that the FBI first off saw these groups as such a threat that they had informants that they were actively talking to. Sure. Then those informants are telling them, by the way, we're seeking to overthrow the government, possibly, and the FBI says our hands are tied. There's nothing we could do. That's bullshit.
I mean, if you care about civil rights, it's not though.
Well, they don't, as is evidenced by plan.
Okay.
Like. It's not even like, one, they don't, as we could already talk about with Carter Page. We could talk about with Papadopoulos. We could talk about with the Whitner kidnapping. We could talk about with the FBI constantly setting up Muslim Americans after 2003. We could talk about all that. They didn't give a shit about their civil rights. They didn't give a shit about civil. But nonetheless, let's take that side of the argument out of it. Let's say, fair enough. You're telling me right now that our civil rights means that if the FBI has evidence, for example, if they have evidence that it's nonsensical.
They can do if somebody turns around, so this is why it matters, right? So if somebody says, hey, here is the actual plot, right, printed off with fucking whatever, like command control schemes, the places that they're going to invade, the places they're going to set up security, where the weapon stashes are, etc., and they turn that over to the FBI, that's going to be enough information for 100% sure for them to actually go through and start to investigate it. If they're just like get a report and the person saying, hey, they're kind of being like violent and they're kind of saying they want to do stuff, you should look into this. That's not going to be enough, because if that was enough, every single rapper would be fucking investigated for murder by police officers.
But again, that's not what's going on. It wasn't just a rapper saying, "Oh, I sang a song about shooting something." We're talking about, for example, if the FBI had embedded with a rapper because they thought that there was a serious chance that rapper would give it. They have informants around. They had 8 informants around the rapper.
The informants are people that are coming to the FBI and saying, yo, I have this information.
This is a fucking joke. It's a joke. Let me ask you, this is a joke. I'm glad that we're having this. Let's go further from this. Would it be within the purview of the FBI to communicate with Capital City Police, Mario Bowser, Nancy Pelosi?
According to the information that I was able to find, they did warn that, and people dropped the ball. Because it was
that's not true. I read the article that you posted over and over. And now if you go down about 2/3 of that article, what it suggests is that that the FBI agent in charge couldn't explain why a week prior to this article, he had publicly acknowledged we had no forewarning of January 6th. Then a week later, he says, well, there was some. And you're using that, him saying, well,
February 23rd, according to Reuters, FBI warning of Capitol violence did not reach top security officials. So this is one of those other things. This is a different article. The other one was from PBS. I think it was from PBS NewsHour.
FBI warning of Capitol. I'm looking for this site. Here. It's going to say the same thing.
There you go.
Were you linking it?
Yeah.
Where'd you put it though?
I put it in our private chat, just where we're at.
Sorry, I had to. So we'll look at it. What this is going to say is that they heard that there was chatter from one person on a website that said that there was potential danger. Isn't that what it's going to say? It's not going to say the vice president of the Oath Keepers said that their organization was plotting an insurrection. That's not what this is.
It's not. No, this is not the Oath Keeper thing. No.
Right. So the idea that then this article proves what we're talking about, 2 things differently. What this article is going to talk about is that there was a website that they were on, and they heard one person kind of being like, I would like to have some sort of violence.
I wouldn't say it was just one person, but then there's also the instance of potentially wanting to keep the confidentiality of sources as well. So we don't know what's in this, what necessarily goes into the actual report.
Right, but none of the and so the reports that were cited, right, that came from newspaper outlets talk specifically about, and again, we can see that the top people at the FBI that were in charge of this were saying we had no forewarning. And then when they finally did say there were warning, they're talking about people posting things on message boards. That's different than having the vice president and 8 other people embedded in a what you now call a terrorist organization that you now claim were describing that there was going to be an insurrection.
Okay, can we clean up the language here? Because when you say embedded, what I think of is that they have actual agents in an organization in order to disrupt it or whatever, right? So they have an actual person that works for the FBI that's actually an FBI agent in the organization. What they have...
Okay, if that's what you choose to believe is the word embedded, fine. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about an informant that talked to them weekly.
An informant is going to have different levels of information than a person that's on the ground being able to report directly to the FBI. And that person can convey the information that they're conveying. And that still may not be enough for the FBI to actually go through and start arresting people.
It's nonsense, right? Like the idea that there's the way you're making it seems like they just said, hey, you know, my local Lions Club, they do bingos and collect glasses for people. Do you think that they have FBI informants at the Lions Club that are constantly communicating with the FBI? Just a guess. Do you think?
If the Lions Club is talking about, you know, doing things against government, probably, but that's not happening.
Oh, right. So the FBI would only be communicating if they thought that these organizations were a danger, or they had people saying that the organizations were a danger.
No.
So there are informants at the Moose. They're informants at, that's what you're saying. No, you just said if they think that these groups, or if the groups are suggesting doing violence. That's what you said.
No.
Okay, so give me the situation where the FBI has an informant in a group that they're talking to on a weekly basis, but it has nothing to do with illegal natures or violence.
Can you drop me a link about the weekly basis? Can you drop me a weekly basis link about this? Because that is not information that I had found.
I'll see if I could find it. I don't know if I'll have it, but I'll post it to you later today.
Because again, like I said, the information I found, it sounded like it wasn't like a one-off thing, right? Except for Rashid. Rashid seems to be a one-off thing, but it doesn't look like it's like weekly contacts and like every single little thing that's done is being fed to the FBI. Like I don't know what information the FBI was getting. So for me, when I don't know, I default to what is the most reasonable explanation. And the most reasonable explanation to me is that they weren't given all the information, or they might have been given information, but it didn't raise to the level of being able to act on the kind of things you said that you would like to see to stop a plot such as this.
We don't have a lot of time. So I'm just going to kind of explain to everyone actual like common sense of this as opposed to the shilling that you're doing, right?
Shilling.
If the FBI had 8 informants from a particular organization that were talking to them and talking about violence and things leading up to January 6th, so violence in areas like Portland or violence in other places, and the FBI was also aware that these groups were mobilizing to come on January 6th, the FBI was hearing that there was potential for violence, or in this case, an insurrection, which is what I'm going to finish here. An insurrection, as they were claiming, right? It is beggars' belief that the FBI would say, our hands are tied. We can't even tell. We can't even tell Capital City Police. We can't do anything. There's nothing we could do.
But what did they say? They did warn Capitol Police of various groups wanting to come in and commit violence.
That's not what the article you linked before said. What they said was they warned Capitol Police. There was one agent that talked to people at Capitol Police and said there was a message board that we saw where one person was suggesting violence.
It wasn't one agent. It was in the bulletin, and the bulletin is supposed to be on like the way the bulletin works is that it goes to the highest people of various organizations to be like, this is our threat. This is our threat assessment. Our threat assessment says X, Y, and Z. It's not going to be it's not going to say, we think that Stuart Rhodes of the Oath Keepers is going to come in and try to kill somebody. It's not going to be detailed like that. It's going to say, we have information that white supremacist groups and militia groups and other groups that are on our radar through various kind of methods, such as open source, informants, or whatever, are going to have a plan to go to the Capitol and actually enact violence. And that's what the bulletin said. It was a bulletin that was released.
It's not what the bulletin said, and
it was
it's not what the bulletin
5th.
said. So much so that, and again, what the bulletin did was it talked about a hypothetical situation, but it didn't talk about the strength of the evidence. We're talking about a difference between the bulletin suggesting that they had someone on a message board, a person that suggested that there could be some sort of violence.
It wasn't a person.
A difference between
it was various groups.
Several people. Okay, so I just want to be clear. So the FBI, there is not a rally that could ever occur in today's world that the FBI couldn't theoretically say, we went on a social media board and heard some people that might attend this rally saying that some violence could happen. That's a different level level of analysis of we have informants that are telling us there's an insurrection occurring. That is a different.
They're not going to say that. But they're not going to say that.
I'll pause you here. And I'll pause you here and finish. So then the FBI is corrupt because if the FBI knew that there was a potential insurrection occurring and they neglected to inform the people at the Capitol Police and other places that there was a potential insurrection, that is what happened based on your own language. You said not only is that what happened, you said they would never. Again, you literally, here's the two statements you just made. They would never say there's a potential insurrection. When I say the fact that they wouldn't say there's a potential insurrection, you say, no, that's not what would happen.
You're going a mile a minute, so you didn't. You're going a mile a minute, so you didn't actually.
No, I heard exactly what you said. No. Real quick, I'll just ask you this. Did the FBI tell Capital City Police, Sergeant at Arms, etc., that there was a potential insurrection occurring?
They told the Sergeant of Arms, Capitol Police, other people through the bulletin that there was the possibility of coordinated violence in order to disrupt the peaceful transition of power.
They didn't say that. So they did say. And so the Capital City Police chose not to act.
No. Well, I mean, chose it. Again, it's one of those situations where people literally resign because they fucked up. That's why the timelines matter. So the three people, it's not a double standard. I am saying,
again, like the idea that it's just a fuck up. It's just a fuck up. The FBI had informants telling them an insurrection was coming, but they couldn't do anything about it. Now, other times we can see when the FBI hears of credible threats that are occurring, they act in very stronger ways. And then they did kind of tell Capitol Police, but Capitol Police, they just dropped the ball. Again, this is something I talk about in the channel a lot. What you see from these people that are shills and defend this corruption is they always
default not defending
to
corruption.
They always default to incompetence.
It's not incompetence.
It is. Imagine that you're in charge of the Capital City Police and the FBI tells you that there's a potential insurrection coming and you're like, you know what? Yeah, we don't need increased defense. We don't. You already know hundreds of thousands of people are coming. What happened?
If you release a bulletin that comes out on the day before that this is supposed to happen, and that bulletin says that there are X number of groups that are planning a violent attack, and you plan for X number of groups planning a violent attack, and not an additional 4,000 people coming from the Trump rally, then you're going to get overwhelmed and not be properly prepared for it, which is what happened. That's why timelines matter. And because they didn't properly prepare for it, because they weren't expecting an additional 10,000 people there, they had enough police officers to deal with some violent groups, not 10,000 people or however many people were at the Capitol. They had enough people to deal with that, but not the additional 10,000.
This answer makes
sense. It makes perfect sense.
10,000. What are you talking about? 10,000.
The people from the Trump rally that came to the Capitol, in addition to the violent groups. So if you're only planning for
they know how many people were there total?
I don't know.
Like 100,000 or something?
Was it? I don't think it was that many.
It was way more than 10,000, right?
Well, let me look that up, because I mean, either way, let's say the number is 100,000, right? They didn't plan for 100,000 people to show up at the Capitol and like start to try to go into the.
Well, they knew that huge numbers of people were going to be at the Capitol grounds, maybe not in the Capitol building, correct?
They knew people were showing up to a rally for Trump, and
right.
and they planned for that. And that's why they had police guards and the National Guard directing traffic.
And they knew that they knew there were groups within that were trying to overthrow the government.
They knew that there was groups that were not necessarily in that, but maybe separate from that or whatever, that were planning on to come with violence. If you go to the article, if you look this up, the people three people resigned from their post for failing to do the correct thing. That's why timelines matter.
So they know that a bunch of people
they were at the ellipse, not the Capitol grounds.
You gave your timeline, please. They knew all these people were coming, and they knew
they didn't know.
If it got
That's
violent,
the thing.
They did.
They knew the people. They did not know that the people from the eclipse were going to walk over to the Capitol to also do this information. So if you are,
I understand the need to filibuster and change the subject, or maybe
it's not a change of subject. This is the same fucking thing.
I understand. So I'll reiterate. They knew a bunch of people were coming to a rally and would be at the Capitol. You saying, but they didn't know they were going into the Capitol.
No, they did not know that they were going to come from. They did not know that they were going to come from the ellipse.
I'm not going to filibuster the time anywhere on this.
This isn't a filibuster. We can go another 15, 20 minutes. I don't give a shit.
They knew a bunch of people were coming to the grounds. They knew that a bunch of people were going to be there. They knew that embedded within. I'm just going to mute you.
That's not what they all did.
I'm just going to mute you. They knew that people were coming, right? They knew that a large swath of people were coming. They knew embedded in that group were people actively trying to overthrow the United States government. And they said to themselves, we don't need that much security. We don't need that much.
They planned.
Because
we
only think that there's 2 or 3 people. There's only 2 or 3 people, or a very small number that are actually trying to overthrow. So even though we understand how riots work, and it only takes a handful of people to start violence and things can get out of hand, we don't need people. We don't need more security.
Rob,
it'll be all right.
Am I muted?
No.
Oh shit! I thought I was muted. I was talking to my audience. My bad, dude.
It worked
then. Anyways, so let's save this for example. If you are, how far is the ellipse from the Capitol? How many miles?
Is it like 1.5, something to that?
Like I think effect? 2 sounds about right. I would give it. I would say 2, about 2 miles, right?
It took them like a half hour to walk, right?
Yeah. So if you were planning for a bunch of people to show up the ellipse, and then a small group of people to show up at the Capitol, and not the additional people at the ellipse to go to the Capitol, and you only have the police officers needed for the small group, you're going to get overrun by the bunch of people that are coming from the ellipse.
No, let me explain. No, I don't, and let me explain why. Because if I'm in charge of police and I'm aware that a large group of people are showing up somewhere for a rally, right?
Sure.
And I'm aware that within that group is a non-insignificant amount of people trying to overthrow the government. I'm not going to say, I assume that the large group of people will totally be reasonable, and even if a violent riot starts up, I would say even if they planned on coming and just like detonating a bomb, you would need increased police just to protect the mass amounts of innocent civilians that would be there.
And they had those spread throughout DC and helping direct traffic with the National Guard as well as other police officers. And then they had a smaller contingent to deal with the group of people that they were expecting to be at the Capitol to help to do the insurrection violence stuff, because they didn't have the extreme detailed information that you're assuming that the FBI was going to give to them. So
and the FBI is wrong for not giving that. You can't have both ways. Either this isn't like.
No. Let me clarify.
It's a global overview. On one hand, you say that the FBI could get FISA warrants and investigate any sort of allegation, even if it's paid for by opposition, because the allegation is so serious. They could violate your 4th Amendment. They could get a secret warrant to spy on you without your knowledge, accusing you of being a spy, merely because there was an accusation. And you say the allegation is so serious and it could harm our country so much that, yes, the FBI, even if it's
yes.
Right. But if domestic terrorists are talking about overthrowing the government, then the FBI's hands are tied. There's nothing we can do about that.
Again, I don't know the exact information that the FBI received, so I can't say how much the FBI fucked up. Maybe the FBI fucked up immensely. Maybe it didn't fuck up all that much. I don't know the exact information. Do you know the exact information they were given by Stuart Rhodes, or not Stuart Rhodes, but Witter and other people? Do you know the exact information that was given? Is that public?
Do you know the exact information about anything that's ever occurred in life? The exact?
Well, no, but okay. No. I'm not trying to be literal.
Right. So what I do know is in the trial, they used the information that they received from these people to say that they were aware that these groups were planning an insurrection beforehand. And they said that they were talking to these people. Now, if these people, informants, were actively talking to them, this wasn't
turned state afterwards.
It wasn't just the vice president was talking to them beforehand. And if that vice president was telling them about potential violence in Portland, but covering up the fact that his group was planning an insurrection on January 6th, then that vice president should be in prison for the rest of their life. Right? For actively acting like an informant, but hiding the most important information, which was that they were overthrowing the government the following day. That seems like a big deal.
I don't know what information it was. So he could have. It could have been a combination of him not giving that information to the FBI. It could have been or it could have been him giving information to the FBI, and it wasn't enough to go on because the information might have not been detailed. Like I said, if you have. This is why I do the analogy that I did. If you have like plans with command and control and all the other stuff that goes with that, you're like, breaking in points, etc. That's going to be, obviously we have to investigate this. We have all the plans. But if you get a person like, hey man, it sounds like we might be trying to plan an insurrection. Like, okay, like that's not going to be enough information necessarily. It depends on the
your worldview is amazing to me. On one hand, if you're running for president of the United States and someone pays for information that says you like to get peed on by hookers and you're working with Russians, please finish. You say, yeah, secret FISA warrant, absolutely. You don't even have to verify that information. That's such a serious allegation that the FBI needs to immediately. But on the other hand, if you're a domestic terrorist group saying we're plotting on this specific day to overthrow the government, then the FBI is like, well, we can't violate the Fourth Amendment. We can't plan and talk about the severity of this. Even if we don't spy on you more, we can't even impart the severity of this to Capital City.
But they imparted the severity that they had.
Violations.
I have to assume they imparted the severity that they had, and they did.
I assume
but they're not.
You are assuming.
No, I have to assume that they are going to impart the information that they the severity of what they actually had. They're not going to say we have an informant embedded with a group that says X, Y, and Z is going to happen, because that's going to put the informant's life potentially in danger. They're not going to do that. They're going to tell. They're going to talk about stuff like that.
Again, this is absurd. The idea that the FBI wouldn't impart the significant, because if I'm getting this memo, and I get probably all the time, I get memos that say, "Oh, there could potentially be violence at this rally." I'm going to treat that differently than we have people at the highest level of this organization telling us that tomorrow
never going to say that
an insurrection. Of course they would. Capital City. So your argument is, had they told Capital City Police that, what, Capital City Police may have linked the information to the terrorist?
No, but they're not going to. It's not about necessarily leaking the information to the terrorist, dude. It's about what any of that could happen. Like, the bulletin's not fucking private.
Can't believe that you're honestly going to suggest this. So, but just say hypothetically, if our FBI finds out that Al Qaeda, let's make it a domestic. If the FBI finds out that the KKK tomorrow is attempting to assassinate Hakeem Jeffries, your argument would be they can't contact Hakeem Jeffries security detail and Capital City Police and say, my God, we have evidence that this specific organization, a vice president of that.
They did all that.
Finish. Please. No, they didn't. They sent a fucking memo. Yeah, again, how many times have you said this? I say they should have did this. You say they would never do that. They can't do it. And I say, so you're telling me they wouldn't do that? And you say, but they did.
They're not going to say the specific organization in charge and the specific organization's number 2 guy. We have that information. They're not going to say that. They're going to say things.
Put a fucking bulletin. They're not just going to put a bulletin up. They're going to go and say, this is a fucking serious threat in your life. This is serious. This wasn't just
on the information. It depends on the information.
I'll just wrap it up by saying this. It's clear when you see these shills that will defend any sort of this corruption from the FBI. The story is very simple. The FBI, first we were told that we were conspiracy theorists for saying that they had informants. We haven't even got to Ray Epps and people like that. For some reason, Ray Epps was the only person that we see actively telling people to break into.
State evidence. He probably turned state evidence after the fact. So why would he in prison? We do state evidence things all the time. Gang rapists get fucking off on this shit by being able to turn state evidence on people.
So then the FBI lied to Congress when they said that he wasn't an FBI informant?
Turning state state evidence after the fact isn't I don't know the timeline. So if they turn state evidence after the fact.
So we got the blue-haired nonviolent people that are locked up. We got them. We got the blue-haired grandmas. But we allowed the guy that was instrumental in telling people at the moment of break in. Yes. You don't think he was?
Well, I mean, he did tell people to, like, hey, we need to go into the Capitol. But
and he was right there whispering into the ear of the first. Well, I would say the fact that he was whispering into the ear to the first person to break down a gate would be instrumental.
Okay.
As it happened.
What do you think? So? Why? No. Why do you think he? Like, I'm not saying he wasn't.
So, like, over 3,000 people have been investigated for January 6th, and one of the guys that was telling people to break in and was literally at the front line when it was broken in. One of the dozens of people.
You believe this guy's an FBI agent?
I believe he was an FBI agent or informant beforehand.
So you believe he was an FBI agent or informant beforehand? Before January 6th happened, he was telling these people, telling the FBI. You don't think that it was after the fact?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm
Why do you believe that?
Because even the day before, people were calling him a Fed. It is evident that he was encouraging people to do this. It is evident that he was one of the top people there.
Why would that make him a Fed?
Because it falls in line with examples of what we've seen the feds do, such as with the Whitmer kidnapping case, where they encourage people to break the law through the use of informants and then arrest those people to increase the side that they want to win politically, just like they did with the Whitmer case, and to also increase their prestige and power. You're saying it would never happen? What did they do with the Whitmer case?
The Whitmer case, they had three. Was it three? Three embedded actual agents there that and everybody was trying to turn on everybody else. Yeah, everybody was trying to turn on everybody else in order to get Alf.
And did they not? And what are the trials? Did they not? When someone was not found,
I think
did they not say? Did they actually had to train the people to use? By the way, the FBI does this all the time. They did it with Muslim Americans all the time. They set these plots up. They trained them. They convinced them, even against their will. They were like, people would be like, "No, I don't want to do that," and they'd say, "Well, you should. It's what they did with the Whitmer case.
Okay, you believe that? You believe that's what they did with the Whitmer case? Okay, that's fine.
Well, it's not that I believe. It's been proven. That's what they did. The plot would not have occurred if it were not for the FBI encouraging people to do it. Why would the FBI do that?
And yet they were still found guilty.
Some weren't.
Yeah. Well, I think everybody was. I think everybody was on the state level, but not at the federal level.
So what's that prove? And
I mean, it proves that they shouldn't have done it. Like it wasn't fully entrapment.
What do you mean? If I entrap you to use drugs, you still shouldn't have done it.
Well, entrapment means that you end up getting off of the charges most of the time because
just because a jury finds you innocent or guilty doesn't mean that it was actually entrapment or not.
Okay, I see what you're saying. That's fine.
Nonetheless, why would the FBI do that? Sure, those guys shouldn't have done that anyways. And why would the FBI intentionally do that?
Well, you already said it, right? Prestige, trying to stop things, finding people that might be potentially radicalized and heading them off to the path, so to speak, potentially.
Well, they seem to do that most of the time. Well, not most. Many of the cases where they stop terrorists, we often find out that it was the FBI creating the terrorist itself.
Yeah, it was the FBI. The FBI gets some sort of information from a person saying something stupid online, and then they go and approach them and see if they can actually be radicalized, and then they get arrested.
Right. So then we have the situation of Ray Epps. First, we were told that.
Why do you assume that Ray? So I need to know why you assumed that Ray Epps specifically is a Fed, just because.
Let me finish. And
go ahead.
Right. So first, we could see the situation with the FBI. We were told that there weren't informants embedded, that was a crazy conspiracy theory. Now we know there were informants, including at some of the highest levels. We could see that it's not again. It was. Yes. First, we were told repeatedly that there weren't informants embedded in these organizations that the FBI was talking to. We were told that was a conspiracy theory. Now we find out when they
said that.
That was one of the claims that Democrats made over and over again.
Which Democrats? Are you talking? Are you talking about people online, or are you talking about specific people in positions of power? Because people online, I don't really give a shit. Like, people are dumb, dude. Like that. Okay, so which one? Which Democratic? I
don't have their names in front of me right now. Okay. I don't need to have their names. The rewriting the history for people like you is something that you often want to do.
I assume you need to recreate history. I just need to know where you're coming from.
Tomorrow you'll be saying, "Who said that Twitter didn't shadow ban?" We all know. Yes, that's the game.
Actually, Twitter admitted to shadow banning back in 2018.
They testified in front of Congress that it didn't occur.
And their definition of what shadow banning was permanently removing. No. Like you're laughing and you think you got me, but Twitter played word games. I'm not saying Twitter didn't play word games. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Right. They admitted that they shadow banned, but then when they said they didn't shadow ban, that's because they use a different semantic term. Then what are you saying they admitted they're shadow banned? If you're saying they played word games, then surely you wouldn't be rushing to their defense saying they admitted they shadow banned.
No. I'm saying that they admitted to shadow banning, but they said they defined what they colloquially, everybody that said what shadow banning was like deprioritizing, making you can't go viral, making your post appear less on people's feeds, right? Is that what we?
I'm not interested. I'm not interested in your.
Is that how we?
I'm not interested. I'm not interested. I'm not interested in playing your semantic. I don't give a shit.
This is not a semantic game. I'm saying that Twitter played a semantic.
Not interested in your bullshit defense.
I'm not defending them. Twitter. I'm
not interested in your bullshit. I'm not interested in your bullshit defense.
I'm not defending Twitter.
Shadow ban people. They went in front of Congress and said they didn't shadow ban people. You saying read the fine print. Actually, they did admit because they called it something different than shadow banning. Fuck you. You're chill. Nope.
That's not shilling. That's me calling them out.
No, it's not.
That's me calling them out. Yes, it is.
This is how I would have said that. You ready? If you'd have said, "Oh, next you'll be saying that Twitter did," I would have said, "Well, here's what they did, the slimy fuckers." While they were publicly telling everyone
that's
they don't.
That's just because we have a different.
In the background, what they were doing was actually admitting the steps that are necessary for shadow ban. They were actually doing, but they were lying. publicly telling them they weren't shadow banning. I wouldn't say actually they did tell everyone they shadow banned. No, they didn't. They didn't admit that.
That's a semantic. That's a semantic. That's a semantic argument and a difference in debate style that I'm going to say.
It is not, no,
we're
it's not,
actually agreement in there.
It is what shills. It is what shills like you do. That's what it is.
How am I shilling for them when I said that they admitted to it and it was fucking stupid? How is that shilling?
By saying that, because the context of what we're talking about is I'm saying you constantly see this where something occurs. Like, for example, we saw publicly that Twitter was saying we don't shadow ban. They testified it in front of Congress.
Yes.
We saw that they said it so often. They also were talking to people in the media that were reporting Twitter told us that they don't shadow ban, right?
Yep.
And then you saying, actually, they admitted that they shadow banned. That's exactly the type of bullshit I'm talking about. It was the same thing with it's the exact. It's like this. They didn't spy on Trump. They didn't spy on Trump. They didn't have spies. Oh, really? They didn't have spies on Trump. What about George Papadopoulos? There was an FBI agent by the name of Stephen Halper that actually introduced a honeypot scheme with a woman with the alias Azra Turk. And you know what? You know what the Democrats said? That's not a spy. That's a confidential human source.
No, that's playing a semantic game that I'm not playing. I am telling you
that
is
playing the semantic game that they admitted that they shadow banned when they didn't. They publicly said the exact opposite.
Okay. This is a difference in debate tactics and a difference in the way we talk. Okay. I am not shilling for Twitter. What Twitter did was fucked up. I don't agree with shadow banning. And that's why I called Musk out when he said he was going to continue to shadow ban people, which I thought was fucking hilarious. But what they did say was we define shadow banning this way. But we also, for the purpose of conversation and debate, we do everything you think shadow banning is. That's what I meant by saying they admitted to shadow banning.
Whatever.
Is anybody going to look into that? No, and that's why the semantic game and the stuff that they're talking about is funny.
I gotta wrap up, so I'll just say this, and then I'll leave you have the last word. Right? Like, it's evident when you ask why Ray Epps, because we could see that he was engaged in behavior that an informant that was advocating for people to do something like this would do, and so much so that the audience was calling him a fed. We could see that for some reason, even though at point blank we have more video that he was engaged in the worst possible things that people claim to care about. For some reason, even though he was on the FBI's most wanted list for some point, 14th, I believe. Not most wanted list overall, but most wanted list to question for January 6th. He was mysteriously taken off that list. We can see through the fact that the FBI's behaved in past behaviors like this, such as with the Whitmer case and a litany of other cases. All of it adds up that the most possible scenario is that Ray Epps was a Fed. Nonetheless, in addition to that, even if he wasn't a Fed, what we could see is the narrative doesn't make sense. Either the FBI had informants and were aware that there was a possible, quote, insurrection that was about to occur, and either they told Capitol Police and other people, and those people chose to not put secure detail there to stop it, or the FBI did not impart the seriousness. Either way, what seems likely to have happened is, one, they know that it's bullshit, that it's not an insurrection, which it's not. Oh, by the way, one other thing I forgot to add. The fact that we could see that the FBI's disparate behaviors from May 30th, which you yourself admit, May 30th, 2020 was an insurrection. The disparate behavior from there compared to January 6th, 2021 proves that the FBI is either incompetent, which is bullshit, or corrupt and had their finger on the pulse and wanted the Democrats to win and wanted Trump. But either of those two scenarios, we can see that it shows a pattern that the FBI was unwilling to engage in a way that was by the book, that would have been a competent thing. So all of that evidence seems to suggest that it's most likely that they knew that Ray Epps was a Fed and others, and they encouraged their informants to encourage this illegal behavior to benefit the side they wanted to win politically. Or if not, they were aware that this possible thing was going to occur and they did not act properly. They allowed it to occur because they knew it would be beneficial to their side. Or lastly, that they know it's bullshit, that it wasn't an insurrection, that it was a riot, and that people got out of hand, but they're exploiting it to massively increase their powers and to go after people they politically don't like. The truth is, it's probably some combination of all three. The fact that you will defend, right, that the FBI had forewarning of this, but say, oh, no, they couldn't do anything. Their hands were tied. They couldn't get into specifics with people. But at the same time, you think that any accusation that is bought and paid for by an opposition opponent justifies the FBI spying on people through the FISA system, just proves that you're engaged in a double standard yourself. And you will always engage in those double standards to defend any sort of corruption from the FBI, just like in our previous discussion, which I don't remember, but if it went as you claimed, where you're trying to make claims that, no, I was okay with the FBI not verifying FISA information to spy on someone, and I would be okay with it if Trump's team did it too. it's 99% chance you're bad faith, that you're actually cheering the corruption because it benefits your side. But if you're not, then you're someone that is so incompetent and so ignorant on the situation that it warrants pointing out just how sad it is. You seem like a nice guy, but I just think it's pathetic to defend this level of corruption. The last thing is, when we talked about policy beforehand, and I said reasonable people could disagree on policy, but when it comes to matters of corruption, when people are making excuses for the boot being put down in your throat and things like that, this is the sort of thing I'm talking about. And we will never get to the system that people like you want, because you will always cheer the corruption, which eventually will come for you and people that you support politically. So, but go ahead, I'll give you the last word.
Okay. So from my perspective, what happened for January 6th is a combination of misinformation coming from at least 3 people within the Capital City Police, as well as maybe the FBI not being forceful enough. I'll give Rob you that one, being forceful enough about what was being detailed there. The Capital City Police planned for a small, not a small necessarily, but didn't plan for hundreds of thousands of people to show up from the Ellipse to the Capitol building, 2-mile hike down the road in order to get to the Capitol building to protest. And once those groups culminated together, the mob was used as a kind of a weapon against the Capital City Police, as well as whoever else was on the ground at the time, in order to try to overrun the security system that was there, as well as stop this peaceful transition of power, hence the call for an insurrection. Capital City Police did plan for people to be in some of the more vulnerable positions, the tunnel being one of those, and that tunnel was overran by more people than what they were expecting. That was a very violent fight that was happened there. That's where some of the most damage was done to Capital City Police officers. Not saying people died from that. That is not what I'm saying. But there was serious injuries done from their concussions, things like that. Some tasing that happened as well. Because of that, you had people resign for those issues, as well as the FBI then going back to some of the informants they did have to get them to further turn state's evidence to do the trials that we have. And that's why Stuart Rhodes, as well as others, have been found guilty of seditious conspiracy. And that's where we're at. Rob, appreciate you letting me be on the show. It was a good conversation, even though we don't agree about this particular issue.
Can you shout out your channel? You want to make sure you do that before you leave.
Sure. I am Cypher, and I run the Crowdsourced Politics channel, YouTube, Twitch. We do a bunch of different stuff, different debates like this, as well as policy discussions. You can find it there.
Yeah, I mean, and I hope people check you out. I think it's important to talk to people that you disagree with. It's frustrating, though. You're a dime a dozen of people on the left that make excuses for these sorts of corruption. We're looking at this in the vacuum just from the behavior of the FBI. But again, you can see the massive disparity. I can't even begin to imagine the sort of cognitive dissonance to actually think that there were 2 insurrections, one May 30th, 2020, and one January 6th, 2021, and say that, yeah, both warranted similar treatment. Maybe it happened. I mean, that's incredible.
I assume that it did, so I didn't look into it. That's my bias.
But it's not just the FBI. It's everything. It's Capitol Hill. It's Congress. It's media. It couldn't be more disparate. The behavior at every single institutional level. And I'm just saying that, I would encourage you to ask yourself why that is. Why did the FBI massively treat it different? Why did the media? Why did the politicians? To me, it seems to me like that's when it turned the debate for me, because it honestly seems like you're not being genuine. Seems to me that you're bullshitting.
No, I'm being genuine.
I think it was an insurrection.
I'm being genuine. I assume that the FBI went through, or not necessarily FBI, whatever jurisdiction agency at the time. So it could have been Capital City Police, could have been the FBI. It depends on where the location is, right? If it was a federal building, yada yada. For example, right? I don't want to keep you on too much longer, but the courthouse that was set on fire during the riots of 2020, right? That was FBI jurisdiction. So the FBI investigated that one because it was a federal courthouse. Whereas the state courthouses that got set fire, and the police station that got set fire, was a state function, not an FBI function. That's all I meant by that.
Well, why wouldn't the FBI be involved?
Why wouldn't the FBI be involved where?
May 30th.
May 30th? I assume that they were, but I don't know if they had the... I don't assume that they have exclusive jurisdiction over that area, right? So that's all I'm saying. So whatever federal agency it is, that's all I'm saying. I don't want to say the FBI should have been the one to do it if it's not the FBI that's supposed to be the one investigating that. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I mean, it was the White House lawn.
Sure. And
Okay.
and there was
All
CPB
right.
officers and everybody else. But one thing we didn't get to talk on, and I think this is where we can agree, anybody that is still sitting in jail from January 6th that doesn't have a court date set up yet, that's a travesty, and they should actually have a court date, and none of them should be in solitary confinement. We didn't get to talk about that. That's desperate stuff that shouldn't happen. Shouldn't happen to anybody.
Yeah, and you're right. That's bad. But all right, I do have to go. My wife's getting pissed. I got to get
No
down
problem.
and put this tree up. But I do thank you for calling in. I do. Maybe we could talk at some point in the future, but I just hope that you ruminate over why there is a disparate action at every institutional level from one insurrection to the other.
Okay.
That's all. So
Have a good one,
thanks
Rob.
so much for calling in. All right,
Yep,
take it
no
easy.
problem. Bye. All right. Well, that was what I expected. Anybody want to talk to me about this right now? I want some feedback because I don't think I handled it as well as I should have. We can stay streaming for another 15 minutes or so, but I want to do I want some people to actually like tell me how to do better. While it's still in my mind. I might have to have somebody actually look into this. Because I don't think I handled that well as I should have. I'll be sitting in my Discord, in the Hangout channel. So. I need more information and you need to pin him down better. That doesn't tell me anything. No offense, Mind Kick. I appreciate you giving me feedback. I just don't know what that means. And I'm a little frustrated at myself. Oh yeah, no, Nikki, I understand that he was leading me down holes. That's why I was like, I don't know what this is relating to. And that's why I didn't let him go on the Kavanaugh hearing thing. Because he was trying to say that it's a transition of political power, and it's not. And also, they weren't there to actually like stop the process entirely. They were there to protest. There's no evidence whatsoever that anybody at the Kavanaugh hearing was there to specifically stop Kavanaugh from being nominated through violence, or get the nomination through violence. I'll stick around for another 15 minutes or so, unless nobody calls in or nobody says anything else, and then I'll go sooner. Yeah, the whole Ray Epps thing, Ray Epps thing is a little weird, but it's not one of those situations where there's like, I need direct evidence to understand that he's a Fed. Like, just because someone calls you a Fed doesn't mean shit. Literally everybody's calling everybody a Fed in these groups now because they don't trust anybody, right? Ray Epps could have just been a person that was like, oh shit, we got to do this. And then because he failed, I was like, oh shit, we failed. I got to protect my ass, which is what I think it was. And Rob actually said this much as a possibility for Steele Manning the argument in one of his debates. Or not debates, one of his rants. Oh yeah, I know Paul, that's what he always does. I want to know what I could have done better. I would expect, this is exactly how I was expecting it to go. I was expecting me to scoff a couple of times because I wouldn't be able to actually get my words in. He railroads. It's fine. It's a debate tactic. It's pretty effective. But the timeline matters, right? And the timeline he has is just all jacked up, right? Like the four possibilities, everything is that like all four of his possibilities is the FBI needing to be dismantled, basically. And that's just basically that's a full, not a fool's errand. It's just, it's biased. It's biased that you just don't like the FBI and you want to see the FBI gotten rid of, so you make the four things to get rid of it. Hey, the one who walks through fire. How are you doing? You're coming from Rob's stream. That's cool. What do you think I could have done better? Because I don't think I did very well. And I do apologize. There is about a 15-second delay between your messages and me seeing them. I no longer pay for Restream IO. I couldn't justify it. So yeah, it's taking a little bit of time to get that. Oh, appreciate that. You like my shirt? Yeah, it's a good shirt. I actually got it used. So, but yeah, it's one of my favorites. But yeah, so in the preparation that I did for this, okay, I looked up some of the key arguments being made by people, just in general, not Rob specifically, but like people in general talking about like security decisions and things like that. And people want to say like that Major General Williams Walker didn't make the correct call. And basically what we have here is like, this is from Politico. So according to Matthews' memo, which is a memo from his then senior military and law enforcement officials, including Matthews and Walker, pled to deploy the National Guard to the Capitol in a call that occurred around 2:30 p.m. This is with other military people. Both General Flynn, not Mike Flynn, but another Flynn, and Piet suggested that the Guard take over DC police traffic duties so that it could be deployed to the Capitol, the memo stated. Lieutenant General Piet stated that it would not be his best military advice to recommend the Secretary of the Army that the DC National Guard be allowed to deploy to the Capitol at the time. Matthews wrote in the memo, adding that Lieutenant General Pitt and Flynn stated that the optics of having uniformed military personnel deployed to the Capitol would not be good. 100% correct. Let's see. Personally, I'm biased myself, not a big fan of any big institution, FBI, government, corporations, etc. No, that's fine. You can be an anti-bigness. I just, like, modern society requires some institution to exist. That's where I'm at. And if you don't like that, then you want to go back to a city-state situation, and that's just not good in my opinion. Oh, okay. I see you got more comments. I feel like there were times Rob got a bit aggressive unnecessarily, but I think maybe some admittance that there is a double standard, though. I get you didn't know the data on many of the issues. Yeah, it's not. I don't think it's a double standard. Like I said, I didn't look. I'll be straight up honest. I did not look into how the people were treated from January 6th versus the January 30th differences, where Trump, basically in that situation, a bullhorn said 2 minutes and the president will come out, and then you hear all the flashbangs and everything to clear the field, right? I don't know what happened afterwards, because my default position is to assume that the government is going to do the right thing, right? So why would I look into that? I have no reason to look into it. Right, and that's another thing. I don't believe that it was. So I didn't look closely into it. So I'm not going to be like, well, I can't tell you the exact particulars because I didn't look into it. But my assumption is that it's fairly similar. And for everything that I've seen at January 6th, the way January 6th people were being treated is pretty typical of how criminals in general are treated by the American justice system. And that's the thing that I have, like the solitary confinement stuff, right? Very typical of the American justice system. Not having a court date for 2 years, actually fairly done with the American criminal justice system, because there aren't enough judges to hear every case in a timely manner. So I don't see why this is like that particularly, is that boom, all that stuff is there. I don't see it being. Oh shit. All right, dog started barking. I'm sure you heard it. I had to kick him out of the room. But yeah, like jail sucks for everybody, right? So that's why I didn't look into it much. Like this is stuff that's fairly typical of the American justice system, and we should fix it. And it should be fixed not just for these people, but for everybody. So, but continuing on in some of the research that I did, what I said after reading this Politico article and that little blurb that I had is that my military colleagues know exactly what is happening here. It's called passing the buck and covering your own ass. The generals in question made the right call if the protest didn't turn into a riot with insurrectional elements. But since January 6th was not peaceful, there were people intent on trying to stop the peaceful transition of power on lies from Trump. As such, the call they made turned out to be the wrong one. And not only that, we can talk about hypotheticals about what may have happened had the National Guard been deployed prior to the march from the rally at the Ellipse to the Capitol. How would the crowd have reacted seeing the National Guard stationed at the Capitol? How would they have reacted with more police officers? What if having more police officers scared that something major was going to happen would have done more than a few flashbangs? What would have happened had there been more dead protesters? What would have happened had there been more people killed by the police? I actually shudder at the thought. For this reason, I personally do not fault the military brass for making the call that they did, especially in light of the fact that Trump had refused to deploy the National Guard on his own volition. However, what I can fault them for is the covering their own ass and throwing Major General Williams Walker under the bus afterwards. Yeah, so there's a number of different reasons. I think the one who walks through fire that this is talked about a lot. One, it happened after the election, right? So the May 30th thing wasn't right after an election. It wasn't done. It was done in a protest to policies Trump was implementing, rather than it being done with elements of people trying to overthrow the government directly, right? The major people, and I also got confused when he was talking about it because I originally thought that he was talking about the Antifa people that showed up in 2016. So that was part of my bad on that. But the other bits is like, yeah, sure, like put them in jail. I don't fucking care. Right. That's where I'm at. They should be in prison. So I don't look into it as much. But the reason why that I believe that January 6th is being talked about more than that is, one, because it was just after an election. Trump was saying that the election was rigged. Trump is saying that. Trump was planning and looking for things that we know of to find out ways to legally disregard the results of the election, and looking for other dubious legal methods to implement a soft coup. And I say a soft coup because it would have been political but temporary, and it would have been held up in courts, and it would have been bad, right? Don't get me wrong, it would have been bad, but it's not the same as like a military coup. That's why I say soft coup. That's why it's talked about more. It's also talked about more because the right wing is also super focused on it, because their people got arrested for the things they did. And people are worried that they might be arrested for saying similar things when they're online or whatever, because that's the kind of rhetoric that a lot of right-wing people use in general. So, for example, had Democrats said we need to bring out the guillotines and get the bourgeoisie, right? If that was a Democratic talking point, a main one, right? And then suddenly a bunch of people show up to Wall Street with guillotines and start trying to round up Wall Street bankers to kill them. People on the Democratic side would be like, whoa, we can't just talk about, we can't just use words. I didn't mean to actually do it. I was being figuratively. But with the insurrection and the seditious conspiracy, those words suddenly become illegal. And the reason I say that people in Republican circles do that is because they constantly use the rhetoric of like the tree of liberty must be watered with the blood of tyrants. What does that translate to? That translates to the fact that some people in the right wing, in Republican circles, mainstream Republicans, are essentially saying that we have to use guns to overthrow corrupt leaders in government. That's why that's happening. Yeah, I thought the one who walks through fire, I thought I did say basically that. Like, if it wasn't happened, it should have been happened similarly. But maybe it didn't come across because I was flustered. Yeah, equivocation is a very big problem. That's why I wanted to get down to the brass tacks of it. So now, another problem is this is a problem with government officials in general. There was a lot of covering your own ass at the start of the investigation into January 6th. We're talking like January 7th, the FBI is like, we had no idea this was happening, right? Because if they admitted that if they would have said, hey, we have to look into that, then it looks like they dropped the ball, right? So a lot of people are like, oh shit, my job's in danger. I have to unequivocally deny that we had any information about this, right? And then it comes out a few days later, like literally it was like January 7th, they're denying it. And then January 10th, they're like, oh, we actually did issue a bulletin. That looks bad. And that's from covering your own ass. And that's bad. That's incompetence. That is self-interest, right? Those are bad things. I just don't look at it at the same level of incompetence that maybe Rob would. Let's read some of this. So, according to the Washington Post, during a news conference on the Tuesday after January 6th, held after the Post's initial publication of this report, he said that the alarming January 5th intelligence document was shared with all law enforcement partners through the Joint Terrorism Task Force, which includes the U.S. Capitol Police, U.S. Park Police, D.C. Police, and other federal and local agencies. He suggested there was not a great deal for law enforcement to do with that information because the FBI at the time did not know who made the comments. In the same report, though, the FBI agent was worried that acting on the intelligence may violate free speech. Yes, even with that information in hand, the report's unidentified author expressed concern that the FBI might be encroaching on free speech. Then, according to NBC News on January 10th, Ken Rapinoe, the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Homeland Defense, told reporters that the Justice Department and other law enforcement officials told the Defense Department repeatedly that they had no indications there would be a significant violent protest, but there was ample indication of potential violence. Then, according to Reuters on February 23rd, one of the 4 former capital city police chiefs, Steve Sund, told senators that he did not see a bulletin issued by the FBI's Norfolk, Virginia office on January 5th, warning law enforcement agencies that extremists were preparing to commit violence. None of the intelligence received predicted what actually occurred, Sund said, referring to scenes in which Trump supporters assaulted police, smashed windows, and charged through the Capitol building, shouting, "Hang Mike Pence." This is, we had small groups of information that was being told to us, and therefore we planned for that, but not the ellipse people to come in. It should be noted here that Paul Irving, the Sergeant of Arms, Michael Stegner, Sergeant of Arms of the Senate, and Capitol Police Chief Stephen Sund all resigned for their failures to see the warning issued by the FBI on January 5th. Capital City Police also acknowledged that they knew on January 3rd of possible extremist elements coming to the Capitol to disrupt the proceedings. According to the Associated Press, on January 24th, they said, quote, 3 days earlier on January 3rd, Capital City distributed an internal intelligence assessment warning that militia members, white supremacists, and other extremist groups were likely to participate. The demonstrators would be armed and that it was possible that they would come to the Capitol to try to disrupt the vote. Although the department's January 3rd special assessment foretold a significant likelihood for violence on Capitol grounds by extremist groups, it did not identify a specific credible threat indicating that thousands of American citizens would descend upon the U.S. Capitol building, with the goal of breaking into the U.S. Capitol building to harm members and prevent the certification of the Electoral College. Again, so that's the level of information that they had. Yeah, and that's what I admitted that was bad. The one who walks through fire, the shadow banning thing. Yeah, that was me. That was my bad of framing of that. Twitter. I thought it was funny that Twitter admitted to it, but also talked out of both sides of their mouths and said that they weren't doing it. Now I don't care that they were, but it's shitty to do. Like, I don't care that they were shadow banning. I think it's funny that they were doing that, or I think it's funny that they talked out of both sides of their mouth. But they should have just came out and said that that's what they were doing, rather than be like, "Oh, we're not doing that, but we're curating the information a bit better so that we deal with bad faith actors." Nah, you should have just said you're shadow banning people. But I get it. Like, if they said that, they might hurt their bottom line. Blah blah blah. Like, it's capitalism level corruption, not like political level corruption. Because it wasn't just conservatives this targeted at all. What else? We got other things here for actual debate. Okay, Nikki said that. I was there. It was fun that day. But I enjoy watching others go crazy. I don't know what you mean by that, Aircraft Sparky. Were you there on January 6th and you laughed at people being dumb and violent? No, there's no me becoming red pill. I'm too much of a person that doesn't like some of the things the red pill. I'm too much of a person that doesn't like some of the things that red pillars subscribe to. No, thank you. But there isn't actual proof of the level of corruption from government on Twitter. That's the thing. Aircraft Sparky. They did not. What they had was a portal that put them at the front of the line for reporting TOS violations. That's it. Every single social media organization has this. Every single one. You protect your big important people and your other people. You give them special treatment because you need them more on your platform to make sure other people use it. Aircraft Sparky is talking to me through YouTube. I don't have a YouTube bot putting spots through different things, so you can't see what he's saying. That's not what happened. So the one who walks through fire, I don't have my thing up, but I can't put it up on the screen. But you're saying that I really don't think campaigns should be able to dictate information being removed that would hurt them, either Trump or Biden. That's not what happened. So what happened is that Twitter and Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, TikTok, whatever, right? All these all these organizations have TOS, okay? And anybody can report TOS violations. And most of the time, a TOS violation is looked at by a computer algorithm, a bot. And if the bot doesn't understand that this violates TOS, then it's going to go through and not violate TOS, right? So what the Biden team did was that they saw a bunch of violations for leaked nudity on Biden's son and reported those and be like, hey, can you do this? The difference is that because that they are linked to a political organization, and this isn't just political organizations, major Instagram influencers get this, celebrities get it, news organizations get it, big time streamers with over 300,000 subscriptions get it. Like, everybody gets this kind of thing if you're quote unquote important enough. You can say, hey, everybody should get the same treatment. That's just not how social media is ever going to work, because social media is reliant on their bigger creators and their bigger drawers to bring more people to use it so they can sell more ad revenue. The business of social media makes the incentive there to actually give these people extra scrutiny. So they had a different process to flag potential TOS violations. And that's all that happened. No. So they're so aircraft Sparky. No, I don't think that it's not any actual proof, because if you can go to those tweets that Taibbi showed that was showing undue Democratic influence, put them in the Wayback Machine, and you can see Hunter's dick again. That's what's there. So it did violate TOS. Yes, I agree that Twitter ultimately made the wrong call of suppression. However, I understand it due to all the ramifications that happened with misinformation that happened in 2016. Investors and governments both wanting them to tamp down on misinformation and being overly cautious, which is what those emails show. It shows that it was an overly cautious call that took about a week or two to rectify. And they shouldn't have done it. They could have. It was a reasonable call to make. It turned out to be a wrong call, and I don't begrudge them for that. I don't begrudge them that they did it, and I wouldn't begrudge them that they wouldn't either. It's one of those situations. They made the story to be bigger than it was, 100%. But sadly, everybody, I got about another 5 minutes in me, and then I have to go walk my dogs. So let's keep the questions coming in, and then we'll call it a night. Yeah, so the reason why everybody's focusing on the Hunter Biden pornography is because that's what a lot of people got banned for. It wasn't for actually sharing the story itself. It was for sharing the nude leaks of it. The Daily Mail got wrapped up in that. The New York Post got wrapped up in that. And then a bunch of other celebrities on the right got wrapped up in it as well. James Woods got banned from Twitter for a week or two for sharing the nudes as well. He blurted out a little bit, but it wasn't enough to not violate TOS. The New York Post story was claimed to be misinformation based on everybody assuming it was. It wasn't the government. The government didn't actually come through and say that, though. Okay, but Aircraft Sparky, nudes themselves aren't against TOS, but sharing nudes without someone's permission is. And since that was a leaked email, at the very least, then that violated the consent of nudity policy on Twitter. And then that's why it was banned. Yeah, in some states it would be considered revenge porn, but that wasn't what Twitter was following. Twitter has a specific consent of nudity being violated. Again, so the CP that exists on Twitter, all right, I can't go into too much detail of that because I don't want to get banned from Twitch for accidentally violating TOS. What that is that you can't, a computer algorithm can't tell the difference between barely legal and illegal. And most of the time, when anybody reports anything for violation of whatever it is, it's always a bot that's doing it, and a bot can't make those determinations. This is why Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest ban nudity, because they don't want to accidentally be involved with CP. But you can't. But they knew it was. See, the difference is they knew it was without consent because it wasn't posted by the person that did it, and it was also they were able to get to the front of the line. So it's one of those situations where it's shitty, but it's not nefarious. Does that make sense? I'll answer again for you, Sparky. Let me know when the commercial's over. Let's see if there's anything. Miss anything else? Oh, so ESOC Luminous, do you have any thoughts on the release of the Twitter files? So far, it's nothing that we didn't already know, although it was proof that Twitter did shadow ban in the way that people expected. So that's the new information, and we know we know some of the accounts that were specifically shadow banned, but not all of them. And the fact that we don't know all of them is problematic because it makes it seem more political potentially than it actually is. And I would much rather that Twitter just release all the information rather than have it go through the filter of biased journalists. Okay, so aircraft. Aircraft, to answer the question about the illegal stuff, right? Twitter knew for a fact that the Hunter Biden stuff was without consent. They don't know for a fact that other nudity of it is without consent, right? They can only know that if they have either direct proof or actual contact with the person in question. So the other violations of consent around nudity that Twitter's policy has is going to be a gray area that's not going to be to everybody's satisfaction. I think Matt Taibbi and Barry Weiss, whatever, Weiss, are both pretty much anti-liberal establishment journalists at this point, and they have an axe to grind. That's what I think of them specifically, and that's why I think that Musk picked them to go after to do the releases. I think this was calculated for narrative building. Right. Hunter Biden never once contacted with Twitter, but everybody knew that this came from a laptop, though. Does that make sense? Like it wasn't Hunter Biden posting it. It was other people posting it from a leak that might have been hacked. No, see, that's not true. That's not true. If it is known that this comes from a leak, right, then that leak is automatically without consent. And because we knew this was a leak of some sort, it hacked or otherwise, then you can assume that it was not with the person's consent. It was. The New York Post said it was a leak. It was a leak from the laptop, from the quote unquote laptop. It came from the laptop files. The Daily Mail reported on it too. They were saying this came from the laptop. Salacious images of it. Ah, jeez. I'm about to go, guys. I got about another 3 minutes in me. That's about it. But I'll link the Discord here in a second. I have a sheet of Discord links that I like to stand out so I know where our people are coming from. So give me a second. Go. There's a link on the page, guys. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap it up, guys. I appreciate everyone coming in the chat with me after the debate and giving me some pointers. I do appreciate that, especially from you, the one who walks through fire. Greatly appreciate you coming in. That's very helpful because I know you're a Rob fan and you don't agree with me politically, but you're giving me some good pointers, and I greatly appreciate that. I will probably review. I don't think I'll do a video review of it. Oh, Ico Witch, I'm just about to sign off. Not as good as it should have, honestly. I need more practice against that kind of debate, to be honest with you. But as I was just saying, I probably won't do a video review, but I might do a video recap of that debate and talk about some of the things that I did well or did not do well. And there's probably going to be more things I didn't do well than did well. But yeah. So, but yeah, I do expect that to happen. I also have 2 debates that I have posted that I need to post up. And those debates are actually really good. The one happened last night and the other one happened a week ago. More debate discussions than debates, and I think there's a lot of useful information in those. So those will be getting posted up at the end of the weekend. But everybody, thank you all so much for joining us. Please, 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 please smash that like button for the algorithms. Follow us on Twitter, YouTube, wherever. Like, comment, and subscribe. Do all those things. All of them help us get out there more. I had people come in the other day and say, hey, why aren't more people watching it? Well, it's because no one knows I exist. And every like helps people understand that we actually exist. So it really does help us out. You can also join us on Discord. That's a way to follow stuff. I'm dropping the link for that again in the chat here for y'all. And you can also follow me on Twitter at Crowdsourced Poll. So as we say at Crowdsourced Politics, keep your head up through a political storm.